What if the greatest power in the universe wasn't something to be seized, but something to be endured? Picture a destiny so immense, so overwhelming, that the very beings meant to wield it try to turn away. This isn't a story of ambition, it's a story of reluctance. Across countless cultures and centuries, hidden in the oldest stories we tell, there exists a fascinating pattern: the reluctant god. These are the divine beings who never asked for power, who often fought against their own greatness, and whose journeys reveal some of the most profound truths about what it means to lead, to sacrifice, and to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. We often imagine gods as figures of absolute authority, radiating confidence and control, but the reality woven through mythology is far more human, far more relatable. These aren't tales of flawless rulers born to command, but of hesitant souls pushed into roles they never wanted. Their stories resonate because, in their doubts and their struggles, we see our own fears about responsibility, about the sacrifices required for leadership, and about the parts of ourselves we might have to give up to serve a purpose larger than our own desires. In this video, we're setting out on a journey through the origin stories of these extraordinary figures, from the quiet hearths of ancient Greece to the vast, creative depths of Polynesian legends. We'll explore why a deity might refuse a throne, why a creator might hesitate to share their wisdom, and what these ancient narratives can teach us about our own modern relationship with power, duty, and the often unexpected paths to meaning. This is about more than mythology, it's about understanding the very nature of responsibility through the eyes of those who understood its weight better than anyone. So settle in, open your mind, and let's discover together the divine beings who never wanted to be gods. So what exactly defines this reluctant god, this figure who stands apart from the typical all-powerful, throne-seeking deity we often imagine? At its heart, this archetype is defined by a moment of profound hesitation. It's that pivotal instant when a divine being is offered immense power or a cosmic responsibility, and their first, most genuine reaction is to say no. They might actively refuse the call, try to negotiate their way out of it, or simply retreat from the overwhelming expectation placed upon them. This isn't about false modesty or a strategic play for more power later. It's a deep, often very human, expression of doubt, fear, or a simple longing for a quieter life. They see the crown, and instead of reaching for it, they see the immense weight it carries, the sacrifices, the isolation, the relentless demands, and they step back. This sets them in stark contrast to the ambitious, power-hungry gods who fill so many pantheons, those figures who scheme, fight, and conquer to expand their domains. Whereas Zeus or an Odin might seize power through force or cunning, the reluctant god embodies a different set of virtues: humility over hubris, compassion over control, and a desire for simplicity over the complexities of ultimate authority. They often possess a deep self-awareness that those who crave power lack. They understand that with great power comes not just privilege, but immense burden, and that awareness gives their stories a layer of profound wisdom and relatability. And it's that very relatability that makes these myths endure across millennia. These stories tap into a universal human anxiety about the weight of leadership and the potential loss of personal freedom. Who among us hasn't felt a pang of fear at the thought of a major promotion, a new responsibility, or any life change that demands more of us than we feel we can give? We see our own doubts reflected in these divine figures. Their struggle is a magnified version of our own, asking the big questions we all grapple with. How much of myself must I give up to serve a larger purpose? Can I handle the expectations of others? Is the sacrifice truly worth it? By creating and retelling these stories, ancient cultures were doing more than just entertaining each other. They were working through some of humanity's most complex and enduring ideas. The reluctant god becomes a narrative vehicle for exploring the tension between fate and free will. Is a destiny truly set in stone, or can it be refused? These myths probe the ethics of power itself. What does it mean to wield authority justly? Is power something that corrupts absolutely, or can it be handled with grace by those who never desired it in the first place? This foundational archetype gives us a lens through which to view not only the gods of old, but also our own modern conceptions of leadership, duty, and the often unexpected paths to finding our true purpose. What makes this pattern so fascinating is how it emerges independently across the globe, in cultures that had no contact with one another. From the icy realms of the Norse to the dense jungles of Mesoamerica, from the philosophical traditions of India to the island kingdoms of Polynesia, storytellers again and again return to this idea of a divine being who hesitates. This isn't a coincidence. It points to a universal human curiosity about the nature of power and a shared anxiety about its corrupting influence. These myths became a safe space to explore a very dangerous question. What if the person most fit to lead is the one who desperately doesn't want to? These narratives function as profound moral compasses for their cultures. On one hand, they serve as stark warnings. They caution against the blind, unchecked pursuit of authority for its own sake, showing us the chaos and tyranny that often follows from ambition untempered by wisdom. The gods who seize power without a second thought are frequently the ones who plunge the world into conflict or impose harsh, unjust rules. The reluctant god, by contrast, becomes the ethical counterpoint. Their initial refusal is not a sign of weakness but the ultimate proof of their qualification. It demonstrates a crucial self-awareness. They have truly considered the cost, the responsibility, and the immense impact their actions will have on others. This hesitation is the bedrock of empathy, and it is precisely this empathy that makes them more effective and compassionate rulers once they do accept their role. Because they understand the weight of the crown, they are less likely to wield its power lightly or cruelly. They rule not from a place of arrogant entitlement, but from a place of solemn duty. They have felt the pull of their own personal desires and made the conscious choice to sacrifice them for the greater good. This internal conflict makes them intensely relatable. We see our own struggles in their journey, the tension between what we want for ourselves and what is required of us by our families, our communities, and our own moral codes. At the core of every one of these stories lies a powerful exploration of sacrifice, duty, and the eternal push and pull between the individual and the collective. The reluctant god embodies this tension perfectly. Their personal desire for a quiet life, for freedom, or for simple anonymity is placed in direct opposition to the desperate needs of the world around them. Their ultimate decision to answer the call, however grudgingly, becomes a testament to the idea that true integrity means prioritizing something larger than oneself. This is the heart of their cultural significance. They model a form of leadership based on service rather than domination, on compassion rather than control. By studying these cross-cultural patterns, we gain incredible insight into the values ancient societies held most dear. The recurring presence of the reluctant deity tells us that cultures spanning the globe were deeply concerned with the ethical use of power. They were crafting idealized versions of leadership through story, suggesting that the best rulers are those who lead not because they crave the title, but because they recognize it as their duty. This archetype champions humility, self-reflection, and a deep connection to the community qualities that were clearly admired across vast geographical and cultural divides. These myths weren't just entertainment, they were ancient handbooks on personal integrity and the soul of righteous leadership. Now let's meet our first reluctant deity, a figure who chose the quiet crackle of the home fire over the thunderous drama of the divine court. In the grand, often chaotic family of Greek gods, where Zeus wielded lightning and Hera plotted intrigues, one Olympian stood entirely apart through her serene refusal to engage. Hestia, the firstborn child of the Titans Cronus and Re, held a unique and honored position as the goddess of the hearth, the home, and the sacred flame. As the eldest sibling, tradition would have granted her a place of prime authority on Mount Olympus, a seat at the very head of the table amidst the squabbling and glory-seeking of her powerful family. Yet, in a move that defied the very nature of divine ambition, Hestia voluntarily gave up her throne. She saw the constant power struggles, the jealousies, and the conflicts that defined life among the gods, and she made a conscious choice to remove herself from that equation entirely. Her abdication wasn't a defeat, it was a strategic and profound act of peacekeeping. By stepping aside, she prevented yet another potential war for supremacy and allowed for a more stable order among the immortals. Her power, then, did not vanish, it transformed. It relocated from the opulent throne room to the simple, vital hearth at the center of every home. In ancient Greece, the hearth was far more than just a source of heat or a place to cook. It was the absolute core of domestic life, the spiritual and physical heart of the family. It was where meals were shared, where guests were welcomed, and where the family gathered for warmth and protection. The fire itself was considered sacred, a living embodiment of Hestia's spirit, and it was never allowed to go out. This wasn't a demotion for Hestia, it was a redefinition of influence. She became the protector of this intimate, essential space, embodying the virtues of humility, stability, and selfless care. While other gods demanded grand temples and elaborate sacrifices, Hestia's presence was felt in the daily ritual of tending the fire, in the comfort of a safe household, and in the harmony between family members. Her worship was quiet, constant, and deeply personal, woven into the very fabric of everyday existence. This choice makes Hestia a powerful counter-narrative to the gods who surround her. In a pantheon filled with figures defined by their pride, wrath, lust, and thirst for glory, Hestia represents a different kind of strength altogether, the strength of quiet consistency. She wielded immense influence not through commands or threats, but through her unwavering presence as a stabilizing force. She didn't need to shout to be heard. Her power resonated in the peaceful home, in the city's public hearth where political rivals could meet under a truce symbolized by her flame, and in the simple, profound sense of safety she provided. Her story brilliantly illustrates that true power isn't always about acquisition, about grabbing more territory, more followers, more recognition. Sometimes the most potent form of power lies in renunciation, in consciously choosing a different path that serves a greater good. Her enduring cultural importance is a testament to this profound understanding. Every Greek city-state maintained a public hearth dedicated to Hestia, and its flame was never extinguished, symbolizing the enduring life and unity of the community. When a new colony was established, settlers would carry coals from this sacred hearth to light the first fire in their new home, physically transporting Hestia's blessing and a tangible piece of their old home to a new world. This practice underscores her role as a unifier, a constant amidst change. Hestia's legacy reminds us that influence is not a single note played loudly, but a complex chord built from humility, service, and the courage to define strength on one's own terms. In a world that often shouts about leadership, her whisper, the gentle, sustaining crackle of the hearth, resonates with a timeless and deeply reassuring truth. While Hestia's power was found in stepping away from the throne, Our next example shows a deity who accepts immense responsibility, but never without first weighing its profound cost. In the vast and intricate tapestry of Hindu mythology, Lord Vishnu, the great preserver of cosmic order, is the divine force who descends to earth time and again to restore balance whenever darkness threatens to overwhelm the world. These descents, known as avatars, are the very mechanism through which the universe is saved from chaos. Yet, strikingly, these interventions are rarely portrayed as eager campaigns of a warrior god rushing into battle. Instead, they are almost always marked by a moment of profound reluctance, a divine hesitation that adds incredible depth and humanity to these cosmic narratives. Consider the epic of the Ramayana. The gods themselves are in a state of panic, helpless against the tyrannical power of the demon King Ravana, who had secured a boon making him nearly invincible against celestial beings. Their only hope lies in Lord Vishnu. They approach him not with a command but with a desperate collective plea for help. Vishnu listens, and his response is not one of instant, enthusiastic agreement. He doesn't leap at the chance for glory. Instead, he agrees under a condition: he will be born as a mortal man, Prince Rama, because only a human can circumvent Ravana's boon and defeat him. His acceptance is framed not as a triumphant "I will save the day," but as a somber acknowledgement of a duty that must be performed. He accepts the immense burden of a mortal life, with all its pain, limitation, and emotional attachment, purely out of a sense of solemn responsibility to the greater good. There is no eagerness here, only the quiet, resolute weight of a job that only he can do. This theme of divine weariness finds an even more personal expression in the stories of Vishnu's avatar Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, standing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the god Krishna serves as the charioteer and guide for the warrior Arjuna, who is paralyzed by doubt and grief at the prospect of fighting his own kin. In their monumental conversation, Krishna unveils the nature of duty, reality, and the soul. But even here, in his role as the supreme teacher, a flicker of that relatable reluctance surfaces. At other points in the Mahabharata, Krishna occasionally expresses a deep fatigue with the endless cycle of conflict and the heavy obligations of upholding dharma, or cosmic law. He laments the constant need to intervene, to guide, and to sometimes employ cunning strategy to ensure the victory of righteousness. This isn't a god who is detached and untouched by the struggles of the world. This is a being who feels the emotional toll of his responsibilities deeply, showcasing a surprisingly human side to his divinity. This portrayal is what makes Vishnu's avatars so powerfully accessible and empathetic. They are not remote, perfect figures dispensing justice from an untouchable throne. They are beings who understand the cost of action, who feel the pull of their own peace and would perhaps prefer it, but who choose to act anyway. They embody the idea that true leadership is not about the absence of doubt, but about moving forward despite it. It's this very hesitation that qualifies them, proving that their actions are motivated by compassion and duty, not by a thirst for power or battle. The stories of Vishnu's avatars offer a masterclass in the realities of leadership. They teach us that even a mission divinely mandated, a purpose woven into the fabric of the universe itself, does not come without immense personal sacrifice and the need for profound emotional resilience. A leader must be willing to set aside their own desires, to embrace a role they may not have chosen, and to carry the psychological weight of their decisions. Vishnu, as Rama, experiences the heartbreak of exile and the separation from his beloved wife. As Krishna, he navigates a lifetime of complex political and moral dilemmas. Their power is never easy. It is a weight they carry with grace, but never without conscious effort. In their divine reluctance, we see our own struggles reflected, and we learn that the most meaningful calls to action are often those we initially wish we could refuse. Now we turn to the icy halls of the Norse, where a god's worth was often measured by battle prowess and fearsome reputation, and here we find a figure who stands as a quiet pillar of integrity amidst the clamor. Tyr, the god of law, justice, and most importantly, righteous sacrifice, offers a different kind of leadership lesson, one written not in boasts but in blood and binding oaths. While he may not openly refuse power like Hestia or express the divine weariness of Vishnu, his entire mythos is built upon a foundation of profound, premeditated sacrifice, a willingness to pay the ultimate personal price for the safety of all. His story is one of deliberate, conscious commitment to a duty that he knows will cost him dearly, making him a different but equally powerful embodiment of the reluctant spirit, where the reluctance is not to lead, but to shy away from the horrific cost that true leadership sometimes demands. This is perfectly crystallized in the famous myth of the wolf Fenrir. The gods of Asgard knew a prophecy foretold that this monstrous offspring of Loki would bring them great ruin. They watched him grow at an alarming rate, his strength and ferocity becoming a threat to the very foundations of their world. They decided he must be bound, but ordinary chains were like threads to him. They commissioned the dwarves to create a magical, unbreakable fetter, one that was deceptively light and soft as a silk ribbon called Gleipnir. But Fenrir, despite his wild nature, was no fool. He sensed a trick. He declared that he would only allow this strange, slender band to be placed upon him if one of the gods, as a gesture of good faith, was willing to place their hand in his mouth as a pledge. It was an unthinkable bargain. The gods fell silent, knowing what was at stake and knowing the almost certain outcome. It was Tyr, and Tyr alone, who stepped forward. He, the upholder of oaths and justice, understood that the binding contract, the sacred word of honor, was the only thing that could secure the safety of the cosmos, even if it was his own flesh that served as the collateral. He placed his hand in the wolf's jaws. When Fenrir realized he had been tricked and could not break free, he clamped down in rage and fury, severing Tyr's hand. The god did not cry out in betrayal, but paid the price he had always known he would have to pay. His sacrifice was not a moment of hot-blooded courage, but a cold, calculated, and deeply reluctant acceptance of a terrible necessity. This act sets Tyr apart in a pantheon that often values glory above all else. He operates as the essential voice of reason and sacrifice amidst figures like the mighty but often reckless Thor, or the cunning and self-interested Odin. Where others might seek a path to personal victory or gain, Tyr's compass is permanently fixed on the greater good. His power derives not from his ability to win battles, but from his unshakable commitment to the principles of law and justice, even when those principles demand everything from him. He becomes the living embodiment of the idea that true authority is not about commanding others, but about being willing to give the most when others will not. He is the god who guarantees the oath, who ensures that a word given has meaning because he himself paid the ultimate price to prove that meaning. Tyr's legacy, therefore, is not one of conquest but of consequence. He is remembered not for the battles he won, but for the hand he lost. His story underscores a brutal but vital truth about leadership and heroism, that it is not defined by a lack of fear or a desire for glory, but by the conscious choice to prioritize the security and well-being of the community over one's own personal comfort, safety, or ambition. It is about looking at a terrible cost, feeling that natural human reluctance to pay it, and then stepping forward anyway because duty demands it. In a modern world that often celebrates loud confidence and unshakable certainty, Tyr's quiet, resolute sacrifice reminds us that the most profound strength is often found in those who are willing to become less so that others can be safe and more. His character is a timeless monument to the idea that our deepest commitments are measured not by what we gain, but by what we are willing to lose for them. From the solemn sacrifices of the Norse pantheon, we journey now to the celestial origins of Japan, where the sun itself hides its face in a story that captures the profound emotional exhaustion leadership can bring. In the Shinto tradition, Amaterasu Omikami is not merely a sun goddess. She is the radiant heart of the world, the life-giving force from whom all light and order flow. Her presence is synonymous with harmony, growth, and the very rhythm of day and night, which makes her sudden, total withdrawal not just a mythic event, but a cosmic catastrophe. The catalyst was a brutal conflict with her brother, Susanoo, the storm god, whose chaotic and destructive behavior culminated in a deeply personal violation. He defiled her sacred weaving hall, and in a final act of contempt, hurled the flayed corpse of a heavenly pony through the roof. This wasn't just a petty squabble, it was a shattering of respect, a toxic breach of trust that left Amaterasu feeling utterly disrespected and emotionally ravaged. In her grief and fury, she did not lash out in retaliation. Instead, she performed the ultimate act of retreat. She sealed herself inside the Ama no Iwato, the heavenly rock cave, and plunged the entire world into an endless, silent night. This moment of divine withdrawal is one of the most powerful articulations of the emotional toll of leadership ever conceived. Amaterasu's retreat is not a strategic maneuver or a lazy neglect of duty. It is the action of a being pushed beyond her limits, a soul-deep exhaustion that makes the burden of constant, radiant responsibility unbearable. Her story gives voice to a universal feeling, the desire to simply disappear when the weight of expectation, the sting of betrayal, or the relentless demand to be the strong one becomes too much to carry. She embodies the very human need to step away, to grieve, and to heal, even when the world depends on your light. Her reluctance to emerge speaks volumes about the non-negotiable need for respect and support from those around us, especially our peers. A leader cannot be expected to shine indefinitely if they are constantly being undermined or emotionally attacked. The response of the other deities to this crisis is where the myth delivers its masterstroke. The myriad gods did not respond by commanding her to return, by threatening her, or by attempting to forcefully pry open the cave. They understood that a broken spirit cannot be commanded back to wholeness. Instead, they gathered outside the cave and devised a plan of gentle coaxing, of empathy, and of joyful invitation. They staged an elaborate celebration, complete with uproarious laughter, rhythmic dancing, and the hypnotic sound of music. They brought forth a magnificent mirror, the Yota no Kagami, and placed it at the cave's entrance. Curious about the source of such merriment in the midst of absolute darkness, Amaterasu peeked out. What she saw reflected in the mirror was not a world begging for her return, but her own radiant, awe-inspiring brilliance. It was a moment of reconnection with her own power and purpose, reminded of the light she held within, not just for others but for herself. This combination of joyful community and self-reflection was the key that unlocked her isolation. This collective effort is a beautiful symbol of the shared responsibility we all hold in supporting those in positions of power. The other gods recognized that Amaterasu's light was a communal resource, and its maintenance was a communal duty. They took active, creative, and empathetic steps to facilitate her healing and return. They didn't just wait for her to get over it, they created the conditions for her to want to come back. This part of the story is a crucial lesson for any community, organization, or family. It teaches us that leadership is not a solitary burden to be borne by one individual alone. The health and effectiveness of a leader are a reflection of the health and support of the entire group. A supported leader is a sustainable leader. When Amaterasu finally emerged, her light flooding back into the world, it was more than just the restoration of the sun. It was the restoration of balance, harmony, and collaborative order. Her return, facilitated by the care of others, underscores that true and lasting power is not maintained through sheer individual will, but through a network of mutual respect, empathy, and shared investment. Her story is a timeless reminder that everyone, no matter how powerful, has a breaking point. It challenges us to look beyond the title, the crown, or the role, and to see the human being within who carries an immense weight. Acknowledging that burden, offering genuine support, and sometimes simply holding up a mirror so they can see their own light again. These are not just kind gestures. They are essential acts that maintain the light for us all. Now we travel to the vibrant, complex world of Mesoamerica, where the feathered serpent deity Quetzalcoatl presents one of mythology's most compelling portraits of a god at odds with the very foundations of his own culture. In the rich tapestry of Aztec belief, a system where the sun itself was believed to require the nourishing blood of human sacrifice to continue its journey across the sky, Quetzalcoatl stands as a profound anomaly. While other gods demanded ever greater offerings, he emerged as the benevolent bringer of knowledge, the patron of priests, the inventor of books and the calendar, and a fierce advocate for humanity. His very name, meaning precious feathered serpent, combines the celestial symbol of the Quetzal bird with the earthly power of the snake, embodying a bridge between heaven and earth, spirit and matter. But this position as a bridge meant he was often stretched between two worlds, perpetually caught in a painful tension between his own ethical convictions and the brutal cosmological demands of the society he was meant to guide. His most defining struggle was his vehement opposition to the practice of human sacrifice. In a religious paradigm where blood was viewed as the sacred currency that maintained cosmic order, Quetzalcoatl's preference for the offering of butterflies, jade, and flowers was nothing short of revolutionary. He wasn't simply proposing a milder ritual, he was challenging the core mechanic of how his world operated. This wasn't a minor philosophical disagreement. It was a direct confrontation with the other major deities, most notably Tezcatlipoca, the powerful and cunning god of destiny and sorcery, who represented the more volatile and violent aspects of existence. Quetzalcoatl's reluctance to participate in the system's violence wasn't born from weakness, but from a deeper, more compassionate wisdom. He saw the inherent value of human life and believed sustenance for the gods could be found in beauty, art, and prayer rather than in the taking of hearts. This moral stance isolated him, making him a figure of immense integrity, but also one of incredible vulnerability within a pantheon that often operated on a different, more ruthless frequency. This vulnerability is painfully exposed in the myth surrounding his downfall. In the most famous version, his rival Tezcatlipoca devises a cruel and cunning plan to exploit Quetzalcoatl's very principles. Tezcatlipoca appears to him not with a weapon, but with a mirror, showing the feathered serpent god his own aging, human-like face, a sight that fills Quetzalcoatl with a sudden, profound melancholy and a sense of his own mortality. Then Tezcatlipoca offers him a potent, fermented drink. Overcome with sorrow and perhaps a moment of very human weakness, Quetzalcoatl partakes. In his intoxicated state, he breaks his own priestly vows, and in his subsequent shame and despair, he chooses to exile himself from his great city of Tolan. He travels to the coast and finally, in an act of ultimate self-sacrifice or perhaps transcendent transformation, he sets himself on a pyre and ascends to become the morning star, Venus. His exile is not just a political defeat. It is the tragic consequence of a righteous individual being manipulated, and ultimately broken by a system that cannot tolerate his purity. This narrative resonates with a powerful and timeless truth that striving for ethical purity within a flawed or oppressive system is often a lonely and punishing path. Quetzalcoatl's story is not one of triumphant moral victory, but of the immense personal cost of holding fast to one's principles when those principles are inconvenient, unpopular, or directly threaten the status quo. He is the divine whistleblower, the conscientious objector within his own divine hierarchy. His legacy isn't about winning the argument, but about the indelible mark left by the argument itself. The powerful, unsettling question he posed about whether there might be a better, less violent way to exist. His enduring promise to one day return speaks directly to this legacy of hope and principle. Long after the Spanish conquest, indigenous stories persisted that Quetzalcoatl would come back to reclaim his rightful place and restore a reign of peace and wisdom. This belief made his story uniquely powerful and tragically poignant in the face of colonialism. Quetzalcoatl's journey challenges us to look at our own societies and institutions. It asks us to consider the price of our own compliance with systems we know to be unjust, and it honors the quiet, often defeated heroes who choose to question the unquestionable, even when it costs them everything. His is the flame of conscience that, though sometimes forced into exile, never truly goes out. After achieving enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, Siddhartha Gautama, the man who would become the Buddha, found himself in a state of profound peace, but also facing a dilemma that would define his legacy. He had unraveled the mysteries of suffering, understood the intricate chain of cause and effect that binds all beings to the cycle of rebirth, and discovered a path to ultimate liberation. This knowledge was vast, subtle, and deeply counterintuitive, forged in the fires of intense meditation and personal sacrifice, and his first instinct, his most genuine reaction to this monumental discovery, was not to immediately proclaim it to the world, but to seriously consider keeping it to himself. He looked out at humanity, mired in attachment, desire, and ignorance, and felt a wave of compassionate concern. He feared that the truths he had realized were so deep and went so against the grain of ordinary perception that trying to explain them would be an exercise in futility, like trying to describe the color blue to someone blind from birth. He worried that his hard-won insights would be met with confusion, mockery, or even hostility, and that the effort would only lead to weariness and frustration for himself. In that moment of hesitation, the newly awakened Buddha leaned toward the peace of silent solitude, believing that perhaps the most compassionate act was to simply abide in his own nirvana and let the world continue on its way. This pivotal moment of doubt is what makes the Buddha's story so deeply human and relatable. It shatters the image of a flawless, all-knowing deity who is naturally inclined to preach. Instead, we see a being who has achieved the highest wisdom and is immediately burdened by it, acutely aware of its weight and the immense responsibility that comes with it. His reluctance wasn't born from selfishness or a lack of care. It was born from an overflow of empathy. He understood the sheer scale of the task, not just the teaching, but the rewiring of human consciousness itself. He saw the effort it would require to guide beings who were deeply attached to their illusions, and he questioned whether he had the energy or whether they had the capacity to hear him. This tension between the bliss of isolated enlightenment and the messy, demanding work of engaging with the world is a conflict that resonates with anyone who has ever mastered a difficult skill or gained a deep understanding, only to feel the burden of having to now explain it and help others. It's the artist hesitant to share their most vulnerable work, the scientist cautious about presenting a radical new theory, the mentor wondering if their guidance will truly be understood. According to the ancient texts, it was the intervention of a divine figure, the god Brahma Sahampati, that finally persuaded the Buddha to change his mind. Seeing that the world would lose this priceless opportunity for liberation, Brahma descended from the heavens and pleaded with the awakened one. He didn't command or threaten, he appealed to the Buddha's compassion, arguing that there were indeed beings with little dust in their eyes who would understand the teaching and benefit from it. This moment is critical. The Buddha is not convinced by the promise of fame, followers, or power. He is moved by a renewed sense of compassion and a recognition that his duty extended beyond his own personal peace. His eventual decision to teach was the ultimate act of selfless service, an embrace of a mission he never sought, undertaken purely for the potential benefit of others. This origin story fundamentally shapes the entire character of Buddhism. It establishes that the Dharma, the teaching, is not a proclamation from an arrogant prophet, but a gift offered with humility and profound care. It is presented not as an absolute command, but as an invitation, a set of tools and a path to be explored, understood, and verified through one's own experience. This foundational reluctance is what lends the Buddha's teachings their unique power and credibility. Because he initially hesitated, we know his decision to teach was not motivated by a guru's ego, a desire for a devoted following, or a need for validation. His words are not a performance. They are the careful, considered offering of someone who knew how difficult the path was and how easily the message could be misunderstood, and who chose to undertake that difficult communication anyway. This narrative ensures that Buddhism, at its core, is framed as a path of personal investigation rather than blind faith. The teacher himself was his own first skeptic, questioning the very value of teaching. This invites every follower to adopt a similar spirit of questioning and personal validation. The Buddha's journey from prince to ascetic to awakened being to reluctant teacher models the entire human struggle with purpose. It shows that enlightenment isn't an end point that separates one from the world. It is a beginning that connects one more deeply to it through a responsibility to serve. His story is a timeless reminder that the greatest wisdom is often held by those who are most aware of its limitations, and the most impactful teachers are frequently those who never really wanted the job in the first place. While the Buddha's enlightenment brought a profound internal shift, our next figure demonstrates that immense power doesn't always announce itself with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it arrives with the comforting aroma of a never-ending stew. In the misty, heroic landscape of Irish mythology, where warriors sought glory and poets crafted intricate spells, one deity stood out not for his regal bearing, but for his overwhelming, almost comical earthiness. The Dagda, whose name quite literally means the good god, is portrayed as a figure of immense, rustic substance. He is the great father god of the Tuatha De Danann, a being of colossal strength and deep magic, yet he is most frequently described in the most relatable of terms, a hearty appetite, a simple tunic that barely covers his large belly, and a demeanor that is more jovial innkeeper than intimidating sovereign. He carries two legendary artifacts, a massive club so heavy that one end could kill the living, while the other could miraculously restore the dead to life, and an enormous, bottomless cauldron from which no one is ever turned away hungry. This image is deliberately unpretentious, a stark and purposeful contrast to the polished, fearsome kings and gods of other traditions. This unassuming exterior, however, is the perfect disguise for a radically different philosophy of power. The Dagda is not a god who rules from a distant, gleaming throne. He is a god who provides, who sustains, and who nurtures. His magic is not primarily the lightning bolt or the earthquake. It is the magic of endless nourishment and communal well-being. His cauldron, the Kwa Ansik, is arguably his most significant symbol. In a world where scarcity was a constant threat, the promise of a vessel that could feed everyone, that never ran empty, represented the ultimate form of security and generosity. This wasn't just a neat magical trick, it was a profound statement on the nature of true leadership. The Dagda's power is expressed not through what he can take or destroy, but through what he can give and create. He doesn't demand obedience through fear, he earns loyalty through unwavering, abundant care. His leadership is rooted in the fundamental understanding that a community's strength is built on a foundation of shared sustenance, not on the ego of its leader. This approach naturally positions him as a contrast to the more authoritarian and volatile figures that populate Celtic myth and indeed many world pantheons. Whereas Zeus or an Odin might command through awe and occasional wrath, the Dagda leads through a sense of paternal, inclusive reliability. His stories often highlight his role as a mediator and a unifier. In the lead up to the great mythical battle of Mag Tuaid, while other gods are sharpening weapons and boasting of their coming victories, the Dagda is sent on a diplomatic mission to the enemy camp. There, he is mockingly forced to eat a gargantuan porridge trough filled enough to feed a village, a task he not only completes but enjoys, turning their attempt at humiliation into a display of his own boundless, life-affirming capacity. This episode is less about brute strength and more about a different kind of fortitude, the strength to absorb hostility without returning it, to withstand pettiness with good humor, and to demonstrate that true power cannot be so easily insulted or diminished. The Dagda's character dismantles the simplistic idea that authority must be paired with arrogance or aggression. He proves that the most effective influence can be gentle, that the mightiest being can also be the most approachable, and that a leader's legitimacy can be measured by their generosity rather than their force. He is the divine embodiment of the servant leader, a model that feels strikingly modern in its wisdom. His legacy is a powerful reminder that we should never mistake simplicity for weakness or gentleness for a lack of strength. Often, the most profound power resides in those who have no need to prove it, who are too busy using it to ensure that everyone has a place at the table and enough in their bowl. He challenges us to look for leadership not in the loudest voice but in the most generous hand. While the Dagda's power was found in nourishing community, our next example reveals a creator whose work is so fundamental, so seamlessly woven into the fabric of existence that it risks being overlooked entirely. In the dazzling and dramatic pantheon of ancient Egypt, where the sun god Ra sailed his fiery bark across the sky and the resurrected Osiris ruled the underworld, one deity operated with a profound and purposeful quiet. Ptah, the god of craftsmen, architects, and the very act of creation itself, embodies a radically different kind of genesis. Unlike other creator gods who might violently carve the world from chaos or give birth to it through dramatic acts, the Memphite theology, one of Egypt's oldest, describes Ptah's method as one of serene, intellectual conception. He brought the entire cosmos into being not with his hands but with his heart and his tongue. The heart was the seat of thought and intention, and the tongue gave that intention a name, speaking it into reality. This is creation as a silent, internal process of perfect idea followed by perfect utterance, a universe willed into existence through pure, undramatic thought. It is perhaps the most elegant and intellectual creation story ever conceived, and it perfectly reflects the character of its God, a being for whom the act of making is a quiet, cerebral, and deeply personal art, utterly devoid of the need for fanfare or recognition. This preference for operating behind the scenes meant that Ptah, despite his literally foundational role, often remained a background figure in the broader, more popular mythological narratives. He didn't engage in the epic battles between Set and Horus. He didn't journey through the perils of the Duat each night, and he wasn't the subject of elaborate public festivals with the same fervor as Ammon or Osiris. Instead, his worship was centered in his main cult city of Memphis and was deeply revered by the artisans, scribes, and builders. The skilled hands who understood that true creation is a slow, meticulous process. These craftsmen saw in Ptah a divine patron who reflected their own experience. Their work was not about loud proclamation. It was about the patient application of skill, the steady hand, the careful measurement, and the satisfaction of a job well done, even if that job was the hidden foundation of a pyramid or the precise hieroglyph carved in a place no one would ever see. Ptah validated their quiet competence, teaching that the most essential work is often the least visible. In a divine family often defined by dramatic struggles for power, fraught relationships, and explosive ego clashes, Ptah stands as a pillar of humble, steadfast consistency. While other gods schemed for the throne or battled for dominance, Ptah was content in his workshop, the divine artisan sustaining the world through his continual creative will. He is frequently depicted as a calm, mummified figure, holding a staff that combines the Ankh, the symbol of life, with the Djed, the symbol of stability. This image is not one of dynamic action but of eternal, unwavering stability. He is the grounded, reliable force that makes the flashier exploits of other gods even possible. He doesn't need to be at the center of the story because he is the foundation upon which the story is built. His power is not diminished by his lack of drama, it is amplified by it. His narrative argues that true, lasting influence doesn't require constant visibility or self-aggrandizement. This philosophy offers a crucial counterpoint to our modern culture, which so often equates value with visibility and success with loud self-promotion. Ptah's story is a divine endorsement of the introvert, the maker, the quiet thinker, and the reliable background force. It encourages a deep appreciation for the unsung architects of our world, the engineers who design our infrastructure, the programmers who write the code that powers our lives, the teachers who patiently build young minds, the caregivers who offer unwavering support. These are the modern Ptahs whose foundational work is so seamlessly integrated into our daily existence that we only notice it when it falters. His legacy is a call to recognize that the most powerful creative forces are not always the ones shouting from the rooftops, but are often the ones working diligently in the background, building reality one thoughtful, perfect idea at a time. He reminds us that the pulse of the world is not only in its dramatic beats, but in its deep, sustaining hum. Yet even a goddess of such radiant and commanding presence harbors dimensions she has not yet dared to explore. Inanna, the magnificent Sumerian queen of heaven and earth, is a figure often defined by her fierce ambition and her mastery over the domains of love, fertility, and war. She is a deity who knows precisely what she wants and possesses the sheer will to take it, as seen in the famous myth where she cleverly acquires the sacred me, the divine decrees of civilization from the god Enki. This is the Inanna of conquest, the one who ascends effortlessly, collecting power and admiration as her rightful due. But her most profound and transformative story is not one of another glorious acquisition. It is a tale of a deliberate, terrifying descent. It is a journey that strips away her confidence and reveals a deep, unexpected vulnerability, forcing upon her a reluctant acceptance of a power she never knew she lacked, the power that resides in the darkest, most broken parts of existence. This pivotal myth begins not with a strategic move for more influence, but with a raw, grieving impulse. Inanna decides to descend into the Kur, the terrifying underworld realm ruled by her older sister, the formidable and bitter goddess Ereshkigal. Her stated reason is to attend the funeral of Ereshkigal's husband, but her underlying motivation is far more complex and profound. It is a pull toward the one domain she does not control, the one aspect of life she cannot command with her beauty or her threats. The underworld represents the absolute unknown, a place of dust, silence, and irreversible change, the complete opposite of the vibrant, fertile world above that Inanna embodies. To enter, she must pass through 7 gates, and at each one the gatekeeper, following Ereshkigal's harsh orders, demands she remove a piece of her royal attire. One by one, she surrenders her crown, her lapis lazuli beads, her breastplate, until finally, she stands naked and humiliated before her sister's throne. This ritual stripping is not merely a physical punishment, it is a systematic dismantling of her identity. Every item removed represents a facet of her power, her status, and her very sense of self. The goddess of love and war is left with nothing but her bare, vulnerable being, utterly powerless in the face of a reality she cannot charm or conquer. In this moment of ultimate vulnerability, Inanna is met not with sisterly compassion, but with the unadulterated rage of Ereshkigal, who represents all the pain, loss, and isolation that Inanna's luminous world ignores. The queen of the underworld fixes the eye of death upon her sister, and Inanna is struck down, her corpse hung upon a hook like a piece of meat. This is her lowest point, not just defeat, but utter annihilation. Her ambitious, conquering self is completely destroyed, yet this death is not an end. It is the necessary prelude to a more complete form of power. She is eventually revived through the cunning intervention of the god Enki, but she cannot simply return to her old life unchanged. Her resurrection comes with a heavy price. According to the ancient rules of the underworld, she must provide a substitute to take her place. This leads to the poignant moment where she chooses her own husband, the shepherd god Dumuzi, to descend for half the year, a decision that brings its own layer of grief and complexity. Inanna's return to the world above is a rebirth, but it is a rebirth into a wholeness she never before possessed. She does not simply reclaim her former glory, she integrates the lessons of the underworld into her very being. She has stared into the abyss of despair, humiliation, and death, and she has returned carrying that knowledge within her. She now understands that true, sustainable authority is not just about wielding the shining instruments of love and war. It is about embracing the entire spectrum of existence, including the parts that are dark, painful, and terrifying. A leader who only knows victory is incomplete. A leader who has also known utter defeat, who has felt the stripping away of all their titles and been reduced to their core self, possesses a depth of empathy and resilience that is unshakable. Her harrowing journey becomes a powerful allegory for the painful but necessary process of integrating our own shadow selves. Inanna's story teaches us that we cannot simply cherry-pick the aspects of power we find appealing. To lead with true authenticity and strength, we must be willing to confront what we fear most within ourselves, our capacity for failure, our hidden shame, our deepest insecurities. It is only by acknowledging and integrating these darker facets that we become whole, resilient, and truly wise. Inanna emerges from the underworld not as a lesser goddess, but as a greater one, a complete sovereign who rules with the hard-won wisdom of one who has seen the top and the bottom of reality. Her experience is a timeless reminder that our most frightening descents into grief, into failure, into our own darkness, are not signs of weakness. They are often the very crucibles that forge the deepest, most compassionate, and most enduring forms of strength. While Inanna's journey required a descent into darkness to find wholeness, the Hawaiian creator god Kane offers a different path to power, one of gentle emergence rather than forceful intervention. In the rich spiritual tradition of the Hawaiian Islands, Kane stands apart as the primary life-giver, the source of fresh water, sunlight, and the very breath of existence. Yet his creative process is strikingly different from the dramatic world sculpting found in other mythologies. There's no great battle with chaos monsters, no molding humans from clay with his hands. Instead, Kane's creation is often described as a natural unfolding, as if the world emerged through him rather than being forcefully built by him. He is the divine impulse within the seed that knows how to become a tree, the silent intelligence within the spring that knows how to flow downward to the sea. This isn't a hands-off absence, but a profound trust in the processes he set in motion, a conscious choice to empower creation rather than micromanage it. This approach reflects a deep ecological wisdom woven into the very fabric of Hawaiian understanding. Kane's reluctance to constantly interfere isn't indifference. It's the ultimate expression of respect for the autonomy and balance of the natural world. He gives life and then gives that life the space to live according to its own nature. His stories frequently emphasize his connection to fresh water, the lifeblood of the islands, which doesn't force its way but naturally finds its path, nourishing everything it touches without demanding anything in return. In one important creation chant, the Cumulipo, life unfolds in evolutionary pairs from the darkness, a gradual emergence that Kane oversees as a gentle facilitator rather than a commanding architect. This portrays a deity who understands that true sustainability comes from working with natural systems, not overriding them with divine will. This philosophical stance offers a radical model of leadership based on guidance rather than control. Kane's power isn't diminished by his restraint, it's enhanced by it. He doesn't need to constantly demonstrate his authority because his influence is inherent in the functioning of the world itself, in the sunrise, in the rainfall, in the growth of the forests. He teaches that the most effective leaders are often those who create the conditions for others to thrive, and then have the wisdom to step back and let that growth happen. It's the difference between a gardener who constantly digs up plants to check their roots and one who provides good soil, water, and light, trusting in the plant's own innate ability to grow. This approach requires immense confidence and patience, qualities often overlooked in traditional models of command and control authority. Kane's legacy provides a crucial counterpoint to modern notions of power that equate strength with dominance and control with constant intervention. In a world facing ecological crisis, his example feels remarkably contemporary and urgently relevant. He embodies the principle of stewardship, the idea that our role is to nurture and protect systems rather than exploit and dominate them. This isn't a passive approach, it's an active commitment to understanding intricate balances and knowing when to let natural intelligence take its course. The ancient Hawaiians saw this divine principle reflected in their own careful management of fish ponds, their complex understanding of watersheds, and their sustainable agricultural practices, all of which worked with natural patterns rather than against them. What makes Kane's story so compelling is how it redefines creativity itself. We often imagine creation as an act of forceful making, of imposing form upon chaos. Kane represents creation as a form of allowing, of providing the essential conditions for life to manifest itself. His power is the power of the source, not the manager. This perspective invites us to reconsider our own relationship with power in various aspects of our lives, as parents, as leaders, as inhabitants of a fragile planet. It challenges the impulse to constantly intervene, to fix, to control, and suggests instead that there is profound strength in knowing when to support without directing, when to nurture without dominating. Kane doesn't abandon his creation. He sustains it precisely through his respectful distance, trusting in the life he has given to find its own wise way forward. Where the pantheons of many cultures present a clear and centralized hierarchy, the rich spiritual world of the Slavs offers a far more dynamic and essential tension, a cosmic balance maintained not by a single ruler but by the eternal opposition of two mighty forces. On one side stands Perun, the formidable god of thunder, sky, and warfare, the archetypal champion of order, law, and the structured world of the community. He is the king, the warrior, the clear and righteous power that defends the realm from external chaos. And standing in necessary opposition to him is Veles, the great shapeshifter, the lord of the earth, waters, forests, and the deep, fertile mysteries of the underworld. Their relationship is the central axis of Slavic mythology, not a simple story of good versus evil, but a perpetual, creative struggle between the structured world above and the wild, generative chaos below. Veles is not a villain in this drama. He is the essential counterweight, the embodiment of all that is fluid, untamed, and creatively potent, the very forces that Perun's order seeks to channel and protect. This eternal dance between them is most famously illustrated in the myth of the cattle raid. Veles, in his cunning and chaotic nature, would frequently steal Perun's sacred cattle, or sometimes even his divine son or wife, retreating with his prize into the depths of his watery or underworld domain. This act is not mere thievery, it is a fundamental disruption of the established order, a challenge to the sky god's authority. In response, Perun, with his thunderous fury, would pursue Veles across the world, hurling his lightning bolts to strike the earth, the trees, and the waters, any place where the chaotic god might hide. Their battle is a world-shaking event, but its outcome is never the total victory of one over the other. Veles is always eventually forced to return what he has taken, and balance is restored, but only until the cycle begins anew. This myth beautifully encapsulates a profound truth about the natural world and human society, that order and chaos are not enemies, but partners in a never-ending dance. One cannot exist without the other. Perun's structured sky world needs the fertile, creative potential of Veles's underground realms to sustain life, just as Veles's wild energy needs the boundaries and form provided by Perun to prevent it from dissolving into utter entropy. Because of his association with the underworld, with serpents, and with the untamed forces that exist outside the village gates, Veles was often cast in the role of the outsider, the misunderstood figure operating on the fringes of the accepted divine society. He was the patron of musicians, poets, merchants, and magicians, all those whose professions involved crossing boundaries, dealing with uncertainty, and harnessing creative, unpredictable forces. This position, while crucial, was often viewed with suspicion by the orthodox powers that be, much like the way artists and innovators throughout history have been both celebrated and mistrusted for challenging the status quo. Veles's narratives, therefore, aren't about a god reluctantly accepting a predetermined destiny of greatness. They are about a divinity who fully and courageously embraces his role as the essential outsider. He doesn't aspire to sit on Perun's throne. He understands that his unique power lies precisely in his ability to challenge that throne, to keep it honest, and to ensure that order does not become stagnant, tyrannical, or oppressive. This acceptance is a powerful model of self-determination. Veles's story highlights the immense courage required to defy societal expectations and to forge a path that is authentically one's own, even when that path is misunderstood or maligned by the mainstream. He teaches us that power and influence are not the exclusive property of those who hold the highest official titles or who command the most obvious authority. True power can also reside in those who operate from the margins, who see the world from a different angle, and who are willing to ask the difficult questions that those in the center of power might be avoiding. His strength is the strength of the trickster, the negotiator, the connector of disparate worlds, the one who understands that the deepest wells of creativity and innovation are often found not in the bright, clear center, but in the shadowy, complex fringes. In a modern context, Veles's legacy is an urgent call to value diverse perspectives and non-traditional forms of intelligence within any system, be it a corporation, a government, or a community. He represents the vital importance of the dissenting voice, the creative thinker, the person who questions the way things have always been done. A healthy system is not one where everyone agrees with the Perun-like leader at the top, but one that has space for the Veles-like energy of challenge, adaptation, and creative chaos. It is the difference between a brittle, monolithic structure that shatters under pressure and a resilient, adaptable organism that can evolve and grow. Veles reminds us that the outsider is not a threat to be eliminated, but a necessary source of vitality and renewal. His enduring myth encourages us to not only tolerate but actively embrace the parts of ourselves and others that are unconventional, that challenge norms, and that draw their strength from the deep, creative, and wonderfully chaotic earth. This profound theme of fallibility and accountability finds one of its most moving expressions in the story of Obatala, a central Orisha in the Yoruba spiritual tradition of West Africa. Known as the god of creation, purity, and clear thought, Obatala is entrusted by the supreme deity, Olodumare, with one of the most sacred tasks imaginable: to descend from the heavens to the primordial waters and sculpt the physical forms of human beings. He is given the very essence of life and the white clay from which to mold humanity, and he is instructed to carry out this delicate, divine work with a mind of absolute clarity and focus. To ensure this sacred state, he is given one specific, crucial prohibition: he must not drink palm wine while engaged in his creative labor. This wasn't an arbitrary rule, it was a necessary safeguard. Palm wine in this context represents anything that can cloud judgment, introduce impulsivity, and distort one's purest intentions, a metaphor for the distractions and temptations that can lead any of us, even the most skilled and well-meaning, astray from our highest purpose. For a time, Obatala works with meticulous care, shaping each human form with the love and attention of a master artist fully immersed in his craft. But the work is long, lonely, and immensely taxing. Perhaps out of exhaustion, perhaps out of a moment of spiritual carelessness, or perhaps simply out of a very human curiosity, he eventually succumbs to the temptation. He drinks the palm wine. The immediate effect is a dulling of his divine focus, a fuzzing of the sharp edges of his consciousness. His hands, once guided by pure intention, become unsteady. His creative vision blurs. He continues his work, but now the forms he creates are flawed. Some are born with physical disabilities, others with illnesses, imperfections, not as punishments, but as direct, unintended consequences of a creator whose judgment was impaired. When the fog of the wine lifts and Obatala beholds what he has done, his reaction is not one of defensiveness or denial. He does not look for someone else to blame or concoct a story to justify his error. He is filled with an immediate and profound remorse, a deep sorrow for the suffering his mistake may have caused. He accepts full and complete responsibility for his actions without a single excuse. This moment of raw, unflinching accountability is what elevates Obatala's story from a simple cautionary tale to a masterclass in ethical leadership. His reluctance to deflect blame is the ultimate proof of his inherent purity. A lesser being, a less principled leader, might have hidden the error or blamed the circumstances. Obatala does neither. He faces his mistake with heartbreaking humility, and in doing so, he demonstrates that true integrity is not about being perfect. It's about how you conduct yourself when you are painfully, undeniably imperfect. He then makes a solemn vow, a pledge born from his remorse, to become the eternal protector and champion of all those who are differently abled, all those who might have been affected by his momentary lapse. He doesn't try to erase his mistake. He dedicates his existence to serving those who live with its consequences. This transforms his failure from a mark of shame into a foundation for profound empathy and compassionate action. Obatala's narrative powerfully shatters the illusion of the infallible deity, presenting us instead with a divinity who is deeply, authentically relatable in his imperfection. His story assures us that error is an intrinsic part of the creative process and the human condition, even on a cosmic scale. The measure of one's character, then, is not whether they never make a mistake, but in how they choose to respond when they do. Do they hide, blame, and cover up, or do they stand in the uncomfortable light of truth, acknowledge the harm, and commit to making amends? Obatala's path is the latter, modeling a form of leadership that is rooted not in the arrogance of inerrancy, but in the humility of continuous learning and repair. For anyone in a position of creation or leadership, be it an artist, a CEO, a teacher, or a parent, Obatala's tale is a timeless guide. It emphasizes the critical importance of mindfulness and presence in our work. It asks us to be aware of our own palm wines, the distractions and vices that can subtly compromise our judgment and lead us away from our best intentions. More importantly, it teaches that when we inevitably falter, our power is not lost. In fact, it can be rediscovered and even amplified through the courageous act of taking ownership. By embracing our flaws and the consequences of our actions with honesty and compassion, we don't diminish our authority, we deepen it, building a legacy of trust and authenticity that perfection could never hope to achieve. While other deities wielded power through command or conquest, the Chinese goddess Nüwa reveals a profoundly different strength, one found not in breaking things but in putting them back together. Her most celebrated story begins not with creation but with catastrophe. In the aftermath of a furious battle between two rebellious gods, Gong Gong and Zhuanzhu, the very pillars holding up the sky were shattered. The cosmic order collapsed, the heavens tilted precariously northwest, and the earth cracked open to the southeast. Torrential floods poured from the broken sky, wildfires raged across the cracked land, and ferocious beasts emerged from the depths to prey upon a terrified and helpless humanity. The world was plunged into absolute chaos, a broken system on the verge of complete annihilation. It is at this moment of total crisis that Nüwa steps forward. She doesn't cause the disaster, but she alone possesses the wisdom, the power, and most importantly, the compassionate will to confront it. Her response is a masterclass in focused, practical, and selfless action. There are no grand speeches, no demands for recognition or reward. Nüwa simply sees what must be done and sets about doing it with a quiet, unwavering determination. She journeys to a riverbed to gather stones of 5 brilliant colors, each representing a fundamental element of the cosmos, and melts them down in a divine furnace to create a miraculous mortar. Then, with this radiant, multi-hued paste, she begins the immense, painstaking labor of patching the gaping holes in the sky itself. It is meticulous, exhausting work, a divine act of repair that requires immense concentration and power. To secure the heavens once more, she slays a giant sea turtle, using its 4 strong legs to replace the broken pillars that once held the sky aloft. Finally, she deals with the immediate threat to humanity by driving back the monstrous beasts and using the ashes of reeds to stem the raging floods. Each action is a direct, targeted solution to a specific problem, a sequence of interventions that methodically restores stability to a world coming apart at the seams. What makes Nüwa's heroism so distinctive is its fundamental motivation. She isn't driven by a thirst for glory, a desire to expand her domain, or a need to prove her superiority. Her actions are fueled by a deep, empathetic compassion for the suffering of humanity and a profound sense of responsibility for the cosmic order. She isn't the instigator of the conflict, she is its ultimate repairer. This frames her power not as a tool for domination, but as an instrument of service and restoration. In a pantheon that includes gods of war, thunder, and authority, Nüwa stands as the divine embodiment of the caregiver, the fixer, the one who cleans up the messes others leave behind. Her story is a powerful tribute to the often invisible labor of maintenance, the work that keeps systems running, that mends what is broken, and that prevents chaos from consuming everything. This labor is rarely celebrated with the same fervor as acts of conquest or creation, yet it is absolutely essential for survival. Nüwa's legacy, therefore, challenges our most common definitions of power and influence. We are often conditioned to admire the disruptive innovator, the charismatic leader, or the victorious warrior, those who make a loud and visible impact. Nüwa represents the antithesis of this. Her greatness lies in her ability to heal, to sustain, and to protect. She is the divine equivalent of the infrastructure engineer, the emergency responder, the nurse, the teacher, the parent, all those who work tirelessly and often without fanfare to hold the world together. Their power isn't about moving mountains, but about ensuring the ground beneath our feet remains stable. It isn't about commanding attention, but about providing the constant, reliable support that makes everything else possible. Her enduring message is one of profound gratitude and a call for re-evaluation. She asks us to shift our gaze from the spotlight to the background, to recognize and value the countless acts of repair and maintenance that form the invisible foundation of our daily lives. It is the power that chooses a mending stitch over a conquering sword, that finds its deepest expression not in the drama of the breakthrough, but in the quiet, relentless work of keeping things from breaking. In a world that often feels increasingly fractured, Nüwa's ancient example feels urgently modern, reminding us that the most essential form of strength may well be the gentle, determined courage to pick up the pieces and make things whole again. While so many of the gods we've explored have shouldered their burdens with solemn duty or quiet resolve, the trickster figures of various Native American traditions offer a radically different and wonderfully chaotic path to becoming a hero. Imagine a being who is not noble, not pure of heart, and certainly not on any divine mission to save humanity. This is Coyote in the plains, Raven in the Pacific Northwest, or Nanabajo among the Anishinaabe, a creature of boundless appetite, cunning, and often hilarious self-interest. They are the ultimate opportunists, the rule breakers, the chaotic neutral forces of the spirit world, and yet, time and again, their blundering, misguided schemes somehow, almost accidentally, result in gifts that transform human existence. They don't set out to steal fire for the people. They might be trying to use it to cook a stolen meal for themselves. They don't intend to release the sun, the moon, and the stars from a locked box. They're probably just nosy and looking for something shiny to take. Their heroism is never intentional. It is almost always a spectacular side effect of their own flawed, selfish, and unpredictable nature. This profound ambivalence is the core of their charm and their deepest lesson. The trickster's journey completely upends our traditional hero narrative. We are conditioned to expect the chosen one, the destined king, the warrior on a sacred quest. The trickster gives us none of that. Instead, we get a being who is gloriously, relatably imperfect, stumbling into greatness while chasing a much smaller, often mischievous or greedy, goal. This narrative choice powerfully underscores a truth we often overlook. that beneficial, world-changing progress doesn't always arrive through a planned, linear process led by a flawless visionary. Sometimes the most important advancements emerge from messy experimentation, from happy accidents, and from the unpredictable actions of those who are not trying to be heroes at all. The trickster embodies the chaotic, serendipitous nature of innovation itself, where a mistake in one context can become a breakthrough in another, and where the very flaws in a plan can reveal a new path forward that rigid thinking could never have conceived. Their stories are masterclasses in improvisation and resilience. Coyote doesn't have a 5-year plan to bring water to the people. He gets in a fight with a giant, and the resulting scuffle carves out the riverbeds. Raven doesn't patiently negotiate for the light of the sun. He transforms himself into a pine needle to be swallowed by the daughter of the Sky Chief, then is born as a crying child who manipulates his way into the treasure room. Their methods are unorthodox, often morally questionable, and always fraught with risk and failure. They get caught, they get punished, they are constantly outwitted in turn. But they never stay down. They adapt, they try a new angle, they use their cunning to wriggle out of the consequences of their last mistake and stumble into the next adventure. This relentless, adaptable spirit celebrates a form of intelligence that is not about book smarts or pure strength, but about street smarts, creativity, and the sheer stubborn will to keep going, no matter how many times you fail or how absurd the situation becomes. This trickster perspective offers a vital and liberating counterpoint to our modern obsession with optimized, predictable outcomes and flawless execution. In a world that often demands detailed business plans, perfect resumes, and a clear, linear path to success, the trickster's tales give us permission to embrace a little chaos. They suggest that not all progress needs to be premeditated, that sometimes the best results come from following our curiosity, even if it leads us into trouble, and from being open to the unexpected opportunities hidden within our failures. They teach us that resilience isn't about avoiding mistakes, but about learning how to roll with the punches and use whatever the world throws at us as material for our next move. Ultimately, the reluctant trickster culture hero doesn't ask us to be perfect. He asks us to be clever, to be persistent, and to be adaptable. He invites us to look at our own flawed, messy lives and see not a series of errors, but a potential breeding ground for unexpected innovation. In a universe that can be as unpredictable and chaotic as the trickster himself, his greatest gift might be the realization that we don't need to have it all figured out to make a meaningful difference. Sometimes we just need to stay curious, keep moving, and be ready to grab the fire when we see it, even if we were only looking for a scrap of food. But what if the creator of the world itself was not a supreme, all-knowing intelligence, but a being of profound ignorance, blindly assembling a flawed reality without any understanding of a greater plan? This is the startling and deeply philosophical narrative found in certain ancient Gnostic traditions, which present us with one of the most complex and critical portraits of a reluctant creator, the Demiurge. Unlike the gods we've met so far, the Demiurge's reluctance isn't a conscious refusal of a noble calling. It is a fundamental, inherent inability to perceive the true nature of existence. His is a story of creation born not from malice, but from a tragic, cosmic ignorance, offering a powerful and unsettling metaphor for the perils of power wielded without wisdom or self-awareness. In these intricate belief systems, the ultimate reality is not a single god but a transcendent, ineffable source of divine light known as the Pleroma, a realm of perfect spiritual fullness populated by eternal eons. The material world we inhabit is not the direct creation of this supreme source. Instead, it is the work of a lesser, intermediary being called the Demiurge. Demiurge, often given the name Yaldabaoth, who emerges from the spiritual realms through a complex series of emanations but becomes separated and lost. This Demiurge is not evil in the classic sense. He is portrayed as arrogant, foolish, and hopelessly blind to anything beyond his own limited perception. Believing himself to be the one and only God, he proclaims, "I am God, and there is no other God beside me," a declaration that echoes biblical scripture but is framed here as the ultimate act of ignorant hubris. With this flawed understanding as his only guide, he sets about crafting the physical universe, the planets, the stars, and humanity itself. But because his own nature is imperfect and he is utterly cut off from the true divine light of the pleroma, his creation is inherently flawed. The material world he builds is not a glorious paradise but a prison, a dim reflection of the spiritual perfection he cannot comprehend, filled with suffering, decay, and death. This narrative serves as one of mythology's most profound critiques of blind, unexamined authority. The Demiurge is the ultimate symbol of the ruler who operates without insight, the leader who is so convinced of their own infallibility that they cannot see the limitations of their own perspective. His story is a warning about the danger of power that is not tempered by humility or a quest for deeper understanding. He is not a tyrant who knowingly inflicts suffering. He is a bumbling craftsman who believes he is building a perfect machine, unaware that his own flawed blueprints and poor materials are dooming his creation to malfunction from the start. This makes him a far more complex and tragic figure than a simple villain. His failure is a failure of vision, not of intent, which makes his story all the more relevant to our own world, where well-intentioned leaders in politics, technology, and business can still unleash unintended consequences on a massive scale because they fail to see the bigger picture or question their own assumptions. The Gnostic response to this dilemma was not despair, but a passionate pursuit of a specific kind of knowledge gnosis. This wasn't intellectual knowledge or factual learning. It was an intuitive, spiritual insight into the true nature of reality and the divine spark trapped within each human soul. The material world, the work of the ignorant Demiurge, was seen as a place of illusion and forgetfulness. The path to liberation lay in awakening to the higher truth, in remembering one's origin in the luminous pleroma beyond the grasp of the false god. This awakening was the ultimate act of rebellion against an unjust and misguided system, not through physical force but through expanded consciousness. The story of the Demiurge, therefore, is not meant to paralyze us with a sense of hopelessness, but to energize us with a call to spiritual and intellectual awakening. It encourages a relentless skepticism toward surface-level appearances and the proclaimed authority of those in power, urging us to always look deeper, to question the accepted narrative, and to seek the underlying truths that others might be too blind or too proud to see. In this way, the myth of the Demiurge becomes a timeless lesson in the vital connection between power and insight. It reminds us that any form of authority, whether over a nation, a company, a community, or even just our own personal lives, becomes dangerous the moment it becomes complacent and stops questioning itself. The greatest harm is often not caused by those with evil in their hearts, but by those who operate with absolute certainty in their own limited, unexamined worldview. The Demiurge's legacy is a challenge to cultivate humility, to acknowledge the vastness of what we do not know, and to understand that true wisdom lies in the perpetual pursuit of a deeper, more compassionate understanding. It asks us to ensure that the power we wield in any form is always guided by a light brighter than our own ego. Now we journey to the mist-shrouded forests and lakes of Finland, where the ancient rhythms of the Kalevala epic introduce us to a sage whose very voice could shape the world, yet who often wished for nothing more than a moment's peace. Väinämöinen is no youthful hero seeking glory. He is the eternal wise man, the firstborn being, a bard of such profound power that his songs could build a boat, heal the sick, or defeat an enemy without ever lifting a sword. His knowledge is the collective memory of the people, his magic the bedrock of their culture. Yet, throughout the epic, this formidable figure displays a recurring and deeply human trait, a palpable weariness with the relentless demands placed upon his shoulders. He is the one everyone turns to when a task is impossible, a conflict is intractable, or a magical solution is the only hope, and while he almost always answers the call, he does so not with the eagerness of a warrior, but with the solemn, sometimes reluctant, acceptance of a man who has been solving the world's problems since time began. This reluctance is not a sign of weakness or a lack of compassion. It is the natural response of a burdened soul. In one of the epic's most poignant storylines, the young, brash Joukahainen challenges the ancient sage to a singing duel, foolishly believing his own youthful knowledge can surpass Väinämöinen's timeless wisdom. The outcome is inevitable. Väinämöinen's powerful verses literally sink Joukahainen into a swamp, and only by promising the sage his sister's hand in marriage does the young man secure his release. Yet when the beautiful Aino, Joukahainen's sister, learns she is to be wed to the old sage, she is so filled with despair that she drowns herself rather than accept the fate arranged for her. Väinämöinen is left not with a victorious prize but with a profound and haunting grief. He sets out on a desperate journey to find her in the watery depths of Tuonla, the land of the dead, but his quest is ultimately futile. This tragedy is not just a personal loss, it is a stark reminder that even the wisest and most powerful among us cannot always control the consequences of our actions or prevent the pain that sometimes follows in our wake. The weight of this knowledge adds a heavy layer of melancholy to his character, a sense that with great power comes not just responsibility but also great sorrow. His weariness surfaces again during the epic struggle to retrieve the magical Sampo, a mill that grinds out endless fortune from the mistress of the northern realm, Lauhai. The venture is monumental, requiring Väinämöinen to build a ship through incantation, to navigate perilous seas, and to engage in a fierce battle of magic and wills. Throughout this arduous quest, there are moments where the ancient sage seems almost tired of his own prowess, yearning for a simpler existence free from such Herculean tasks. He goes along because he must, because the prosperity of his people depends on it, but the fire of ambition has long since burned down to the embers of duty. This resonates deeply with the modern experience of burnout, particularly among caregivers, leaders, and innovators, those who are so capable that they become the default solution for every problem, until the very source of their strength feels like a draining curse. Väinämöinen's sighs are the sighs of the ever-reliable employee, the go-to family problem solver, the community pillar who is looked to for answers so often that no one thinks to ask if they themselves are okay. What makes his character so enduring is that he isn't an infallible god on a mountain. He is the wise elder who still needs his community. He doesn't accomplish his great deeds alone. He relies on the blacksmith Ilmarinen to forge impossible artifacts. He accepts help from others on his journeys, and he operates within a network of relationships. This interdependence is crucial. It underscores the narrative's deep understanding that no one, no matter how wise or powerful, is meant to carry the world alone. The perpetual problem solver needs a problem-solving community around them. Väinämöinen's story is a powerful plea for reciprocity, a reminder that we must not only value the wisdom others give us, but also offer them our support and gratitude in return. His narrative challenges us to see the whole person behind the role, to acknowledge the emotional and spiritual toll of constant reliance, and to understand that even the strongest pillars need a foundation to rest upon. His legacy is a call to celebrate our sages not just for what they can do for us, but for who they are, and to ensure that in our constant taking of their wisdom, we do not forget to give them the recognition and rest they need to continue shining their light. From the weary wisdom of the Finnish sage, we turn now to a story not of reluctance, but of its tragic opposite, a tale that charts the perilous journey from radiant benevolence to blinding pride. In the grand tapestry of Persian mythology, the legendary King Jamshid, or Jamshid, stands as a monumental figure whose life story serves as one of history's most enduring parables about the intoxicating and corrupting nature of absolute power. His reign begins as nothing short of a divine mandate, a golden age ushered in by a ruler so in tune with the cosmic order that he becomes the literal architect of human civilization. Under his wise and innovative guidance, society flourishes in ways previously unimaginable. Ancient texts credit him with mastering the arts of weaving and armor-making, with establishing the intricate class structure of warriors, priests, and farmers that would form the backbone of Persian society, and even with discovering how to produce wine and perfumes. His rule was a time of perfect justice, boundless prosperity, and unparalleled innovation, a period where hunger, disease, and even death itself were said to have been held at bay. He was not just a king, he was a culture hero, a bringer of light and order from chaos, a leader so successful he seemed to have achieved the impossible. This unprecedented success, however, contains the seeds of its own destruction. The very height of Jamshid's achievements begins to warp his perception of himself. Surrounded by constant praise and witnessing the miraculous flourishing of his kingdom, he starts to internalize the glory. The line between being a channel for divine favor and being the source of that favor begins to blur in his mind. His initial confidence, a necessary quality for any great leader, slowly curdles into something far more dangerous, a consuming hubris. The pivotal moment arrives when he gazes upon his magnificent kingdom, a world he rightly helped build, and makes a catastrophic error in attribution. He declares that all of this splendor is the product of his own power and genius alone. In that declaration, he commits the ultimate act of arrogance for a divinely sanctioned ruler. He forgets his role as a steward and begins to see himself as the sole author of reality, effectively placing himself on the same level as the divine. This isn't a simple mistake. It's a fundamental rupture of the sacred covenant between a leader and the higher principles he is meant to serve. The consequences are immediate and devastating. The divine favor, the far or royal glory that had shimmered around him as a visible mark of his rightful rule, abruptly departs. In Persian cosmology, this far was not a permanent possession but a sacred loan, a spiritual authority that remained only so long as the ruler remained just, humble, and aligned with the divine will. Its departure is the spiritual equivalent of the sun vanishing from the sky. With the loss of his far, Jamshid's invincibility shatters. His kingdom, once unified and harmonious, fractures into discontent and rebellion. The people who once adored him now see a tyrant blinded by his own ego, and they turn away. His strength fails, his wisdom deserts him, and he becomes vulnerable to the ambitions of a new, dark force rising to challenge him. The malevolent foreign king Zahak, who sweeps in to easily conquer the weakened empire and usher in a long age of tyranny and suffering. Jamshid's fall is not merely a personal tragedy. It plunges his entire world into darkness. demonstrating that the corruption of a single leader can unravel the fabric of an entire civilization. What makes Jamshid's story so powerfully distinct is that his fatal flaw is not cowardice or incompetence or even malice. It is the much more subtle and insidious poison of pride born from overwhelming success. He is not a reluctant leader, he is initially a spectacularly good one. This is precisely why his narrative is such a vital cautionary tale. It speaks directly to anyone who has ever experienced success and felt the first seductive whispers of vanity. It warns that the greatest danger often arrives not in the midst of struggle, but at the pinnacle of achievement when applause is loudest and the temptation to believe one's own press is at its strongest. His journey illustrates with brutal clarity how easily justified confidence can transform into unjustified hubris when it is not constantly checked by self-reflection and humility. Jamshid's legacy, therefore, is a timeless call for continuous mindfulness in any position of authority, whether it be leading a nation, a company, a community, or simply a family. His story reminds us that true leadership is not a destination one arrives at, but a practice that must be continually nurtured. It requires a conscious and daily remembrance that power is a trust given, not a possession owned, that success is always a collaborative effort between the leader, the led, and the circumstances that allowed for that success, and that the moment a leader starts to believe they are the sole source of their own greatness is the very moment they begin their inevitable decline. He stands as an eternal monument to the idea that the best leaders are not those who never fail, but those who, even at the height of their power, never forget to look beyond themselves, to listen, and to remember that they serve something far greater than their own ego. While other creators might impose their will upon the world, the rainbow serpent of Australian Aboriginal mythology embodies a different kind of genesis, one of deep listening, profound respect, and a conscious choice to hold back. This is not a deity who carves the land with brute force, but a being who moves through the dreaming, singing the world into existence through its very body. Its immense power expressed through a gentle, deliberate undulation that shapes rivers, valleys, and mountain ranges. Its creative act is one of intimate connection, not distant command. It knows the earth because it is of the earth, and its movements are a collaboration with the existing spirit of the land. This foundational relationship establishes a critical principle from the very beginning. True creation is not about domination, but about harmonious coexistence. The rainbow serpent brings form to the world not as a conqueror claiming territory, but as a parent nurturing a child, with a focus on long-term health and balance rather than immediate, flashy results. This inherent restraint is most powerfully visible in its role as the ultimate enforcer of natural law. The rainbow serpent is the guardian of the boundaries it helped create, ensuring that the delicate balance of the ecosystem is maintained. Its stories are filled with lessons about what happens when these laws are broken. In many traditions, if people take too much from a waterhole without giving back, if they hunt a species to the edge of extinction, or if they disrespect the sacred sites connected to the serpent, it will respond. But its response is rarely one of wanton destruction or arbitrary punishment. It might cause the waters to dry up, not out of anger, but as a natural consequence, a direct result of the imbalance that has been created. It might send a flood to cleanse and reset the land, a necessary correction that, while severe, serves to restore the health of the whole system. This is a form of power that is deeply ecological and cyclical, operating on the understanding that for life to continue, take must be balanced by give, and action must be tempered by consequence. Its authority is not based on fear, but on a revered and understood covenant between humanity and the natural world. This philosophy stands in stark contrast to so many other creator gods who rule through decree and demand obedience. The rainbow serpent's leadership model is one of embedded stewardship. It doesn't issue commandments from a remote throne in the sky. Its law is written into the landscape itself, in the flow of the rivers it created and the cycle of the seasons it helps govern. To live well is to learn to read this landscape, to understand the interconnectedness of all things, and to recognize that human society is just one thread in a much larger, living tapestry. The serpent itself models this behavior. Its famous reluctance to overstep, to use its immense power for mere show or selfish gain, is a divine lesson in humility and sustainability. It shows that the most potent form of control is actually self-control, the wisdom to know when to act and when to remain still, when to create and when to simply let be. This is a being so secure in its power that it feels no need to constantly prove it, understanding that true strength is often most effectively expressed through patience and reserve. In an era defined by climate change and biodiversity loss, the ancient wisdom of the rainbow serpent feels not just relevant but urgently necessary. Its stories offer a devastating critique of the modern worldview that sees nature as a resource to be exploited, a collection of separate parts to be mined, logged, and developed without regard for the whole. The serpent presents nature as a sentient, interconnected relative, a system that we are a part of, not apart from. Its legacy is a call to completely reorient our relationship with the planet, moving from one of extraction and short-term gain to one of reciprocity and long-term care. It argues that our survival depends on our ability to rediscover this ancient form of ecological intelligence, to learn to work with natural systems rather than constantly fighting against them in a futile attempt to dominate what we do not understand. The lesson of the rainbow serpent is ultimately one of profound reverence for life in all its forms. It teaches that power, when wielded with wisdom, is not a tool for personal aggrandizement, but a responsibility to safeguard the delicate web of existence. Its creative restraint is not a limitation. It is the highest expression of its strength, a conscious choice to ensure that its creation can thrive long into the future without needing constant corrective intervention. In a world searching for sustainable models of leadership, the serpent offers a timeless blueprint that the most enduring power is gentle, the most effective authority is respectful, and the greatest legacy is a healthy, balanced world that can sustain itself for generations to come. In the sprawling, vibrant tapestry of Maya mythology, where kings drew their power from bloodletting rituals and warfare, was a sacred duty to the gods. One deity embodied a radically different source of authority. Itzamna, the ancient father of the Maya pantheon, was not a god of thunder or a lord of the sun, but a being whose very essence was knowledge, often depicted as a wise, aged man with a hooked nose and a gentle, knowing expression. He was the divine patron of writing, science, medicine, and the sacred calendar, the fundamental pillars of Maya intellectual and spiritual life. His power did not roar, it whispered in the scratch of a scribe's pen, it calculated in the precise movement of the stars, and it healed with the knowledge of herbs and ritual. In a world that celebrated martial prowess, Itzamna's enduring legacy presents a compelling argument that the most transformative power is not seized by the sword, but cultivated by the mind. This profound preference for the life of the intellect is what sets Itzamna apart. His narratives are strikingly devoid of the dramatic battles and vengeful plots that characterize so many other mythological traditions. Instead of engaging in the petty squabbles and conflicts that often consumed the other gods, Itzamna is consistently portrayed as a figure of serene contemplation, a divine administrator and inventor who operates above the fray. His reluctance to engage in brute conflict isn't a weakness. It's a conscious, strategic choice to invest energy in endeavors that yield lasting rather than temporary results. While a war god might win a battle, Itzamna gifted humanity with the tools to build an entire civilization. He was credited with creating the complex Maya writing system, an intricate combination of logograms and syllabic signs that allowed history, ritual, and knowledge to be recorded for future generations. He gave his people the sacred calendar, a dizzyingly accurate system that wove together a 260-day ritual cycle with a 365-day solar year, allowing them to synchronize their lives with the profound rhythms of the cosmos. These were not mere inventions, they were the very infrastructure of culture itself, gifts that would endure long after any single military victory was forgotten. This focus on nurturing rather than conquering establishes Itzamna as the ultimate patron of community and sustainable growth. His association with healing and medicine further underscores this role. He wasn't just a distant scholar, his knowledge was applied for the direct betterment of his people, mending bodies and spirits. He was often invoked as a protector against disease and misfortune, a divine physician whose power flowed from understanding the world, not from dominating it. This paints a picture of leadership that is fundamentally paternal and compassionate, rooted in a deep desire to see one's community not just survive but truly flourish. His influence was felt in the quiet scriptorium where a scribe recorded a king's lineage, in the observatory where a priest astronomer tracked the planet Venus, and in the healer's hut where remedies were administered. His rule was not exercised from a battlefield throne, but from the collective mind of a civilization that valued learning, artistry, and the preservation of knowledge above all else. In a modern world that still often equates strong leadership with loud, assertive, and frequently aggressive posturing, Itzamna's ancient example offers a powerful and necessary corrective. He challenges the very notion that power must be primarily physical or political. His story argues that a leader's most enduring legacy is not the territory they conquer or the enemies they subdue, but the minds they enlighten, the culture they enrich, and the systems of well-being they put in place. The cities built under his spiritual guidance were not just political capitals. They were centers of learning with vast libraries of bark paper books that, tragically, were later destroyed by conquerors who failed to recognize their value. This destruction itself stands as a stark testament to the clash between two models of power, one that seeks to erase knowledge and one, like Itzamna's, that seeks to create and preserve it. His character serves as a timeless reminder that the forces which truly shape humanity are often the quiet ones. The diplomat who prevents a war through careful negotiation wields a power far greater than the general who wins it. The scientist who discovers a cure saves infinitely more lives than the soldier who takes them. The teacher who ignites a passion for learning in a young mind plants a seed that can grow for generations. Itzamna's scholarly rule validates these often unsung forms of influence, arguing that the pen, the calendar, and the healing touch are not alternatives to power. They are its highest and most civilized expression. In honoring him, the Maya were making a profound statement about their own priorities, celebrating a form of strength that builds, sustains, and enlightens, proving that a god who never raises a weapon can indeed be the mightiest of them all. From the warm, scholarly halls of Itzamna's celestial library, we now plunge into the icy, unforgiving waters of the Arctic, where a story of profound betrayal gives birth to a goddess whose very emotions dictate the survival of an entire people. The origin of Sedna, the Inuit sea goddess, is not a tale of divine election or a quest for power. It is a harrowing story of trauma that transforms a young woman into a reluctant, vengeful, and deeply powerful deity. In the stark world of the Inuit, where life depends on the precarious generosity of the sea, Sedna's story provides a chilling and poignant explanation for its fickle nature, framing the very forces of nature as a direct reflection of a wounded heart. There are several versions of her myth, but each one centers on a devastating act of betrayal that seals her fate. In one of the most common tellings, Sedna is a beautiful young woman living with her father. Many suitors seek her hand, but she refuses them all. One day, a mysterious hunter arrives, promising to take her away to a life of comfort and plenty in his distant home. Sedna, perhaps yearning for something beyond her difficult life, agrees and goes with him, but the promise is a cruel lie. Her new husband is not a man at all, but a bird spirit in disguise, a fulmar, and he takes her to a desolate, filthy nest on a remote cliff where she lives in misery, cold, and hunger. In another version, her father, angered by her rejection of all suitors or seeking to be rid of her, forces her into a marriage with a dangerous, dog-like creature. The core trauma remains the same. Sedna is deceived and betrayed by the very figures who should have protected her, handed over to a life of suffering for someone else's gain or convenience. Her salvation, when it comes, is just as traumatic as her betrayal. In the Fulmar story, her father eventually hears of her misery and sets out in his kayak to rescue her. He succeeds in taking her away, but her enraged bird husband and his kin summon a terrible storm to pursue them. As the waves threaten to capsize the small boat and drown them both, her father makes a horrifying, pragmatic decision to sacrifice his daughter to save himself. He seizes Sedna and hurls her over the side into the churning, icy water. Desperate to live, she clings tenaciously to the side of the kayak. In a final, brutal act of survival, her father takes his knife or a paddle and chops at her fingers, knuckle by knuckle, until she loses her grip and sinks into the depths. It is this ultimate act of abandonment, this severing of the last familial tie by her own father's hand, that completes her transformation. As her severed fingers sink into the ocean, they are transformed into the first seals, walruses, and whales, the very marine mammals the Inuit depend on for survival. Sedna herself does not die. She descends to the bottom of the sea, where she becomes the powerful and eternal mistress of the marine world, Adlivon. Her power, however, is inextricably linked to her pain. Sedna does not rule her domain with benevolent joy or wise detachment. She resides in a cold, dark underworld at the bottom of the sea, her hair perpetually tangled and matted, a physical manifestation of the chaos of her emotions. The animals she creates from her own body are now her children, and she holds them close. When humanity, the descendants of those who betrayed her, sins, when taboos are broken, when greed leads to overhunting, when disrespect is shown to the animals or the natural world, Sedna's anger and sorrow flare. She responds not by lashing out directly, but by withdrawing her children. She gathers the sea creatures to her, causing a scarcity that brings famine and starvation to the people. Her power is a direct, reactive force born from her immense, unhealed suffering. She wields it not out of a desire for worship or control, but as an instinctual, protective response to the pain that humanity's actions continually trigger within her. She is a goddess who governs from a place of profound trauma, her divine authority a direct consequence of the most human of tragedies. This makes her one of the most psychologically complex and empathetic figures in all mythology. Her narrative offers a stunningly insightful perspective on the origins of power that are born from injustice. It suggests that those who have been deeply wronged can become immense, elemental forces, their personal grief magnified into a power that can sustain or destroy entire communities. Sedna is not a cruel monster. She is a victim whose pain has become so vast that it now dictates the rhythm of life and death. Her story forces us to practice a difficult form of empathy, to understand that the anger and grudges of the deeply wounded are not mere bitterness, but are often the last defense mechanisms of a shattered spirit. It asks us to look at a force of nature that brings famine and to see not a capricious deity, but a betrayed woman, alone in the dark, holding her children close because she cannot trust the world above to treat them with respect. The Inuit response to this reality is not to curse Sedna, but to acknowledge their role in her pain. This understanding is ritualized in a powerful shamanic practice. When scarcity strikes, the community knows that Sedna's anger must be soothed. A shaman undertakes a perilous spiritual journey to the bottom of the sea to find her. Upon reaching her, the shaman does not make demands or threats. Instead, they perform an act of intimate, tender service. They carefully comb the tangles and mats from her long hair. This ritual is one of the most beautiful acts of symbolic healing in any spiritual tradition. Combing her hair is an act of profound care and respect, a quiet acknowledgement of her suffering and a gesture meant to soothe her troubled spirit. It is a way of saying, "We see your pain, we are sorry for our part in it, we are here to help you carry this burden." Only when she is comforted in this way will she release her children back to the hunters, restoring balance and abundance to the world. Sedna's enduring lesson is that balance, whether in our personal lives or in our relationship with the natural world, cannot be restored through force or negotiation alone. It requires genuine acknowledgement, empathy, and a willingness to perform the gentle, difficult work of healing. Her story teaches that the wounds of the past, if ignored, will inevitably constrict the flow of life in the present. But it also offers a profound hope that by bravely facing the sources of pain, by offering compassion instead of defiance, and by tending to the wounds we have helped create, we can begin to untangle the most knotted of histories and allow life to flow freely once more. In the often harsh and warlike world of the ancient Germanic tribes, where gods like Odin and Thor were celebrated for their battle prowess, the worship of the goddess Nerthus stands out as a profound and peaceful anomaly. She was not a deity of the spear or the shield, but a powerful earth mother, a being whose very essence was the fertile soil, the gentle rain, and the quiet, life-giving force of nature itself. Her presence was felt not in the clash of armies, but in the sprouting of the spring barley and the healthy lowing of cattle in the field. Her most sacred ritual involved a journey of pure, silent benediction. Once a year, her priests would harness a team of cows to a covered wagon, which housed her invisible, numinous presence. This sacred procession would then move slowly through the countryside, and wherever the wagon traveled, it was met not with fear, but with universal celebration. Weapons were put away, conflicts were set aside, and a time of absolute peace was declared. The land itself was believed to blossom in the wake of her passing, her invisible gaze blessing the fields with fertility and the people with harmony. This was a power that needed no enforcement, that commanded reverence through its pure, generative benevolence. This cyclical ritual, however, was defined as much by its conclusion as by its journey. After her tour of the lands, the wagon and the goddess within it would be led to a sacred grove on an island, a place so holy that only her priest was permitted to enter. There, in the deep, quiet seclusion of this natural sanctuary, the wagon would be washed in a hidden lake by slaves who were then silently drowned, perhaps to preserve the sanctity of the secret ritual or to return the life given by the goddess back to the watery source from which all life comes. Following this intense, mysterious cleansing, the goddess herself would retreat into a period of profound quiet. The wagon was covered, the grove was left in absolute peace, and Nerthus withdrew from the active world. This was not a disappearance or an abandonment of her people. it was a necessary phase in her sacred cycle. Her power was not a constant, blazing sun, but a rhythm that included a vital period of rest and rejuvenation. Her reluctance to be constantly active or publicly visible was not a sign of a weak or absentee deity, but the core mechanism of her sustainable strength. She understood that to give life continuously, one must also know how to retreat and recharge. This rhythmic model of leadership, so beautifully encoded in Nerthus's worship, offers a devastating critique of our modern, non-stop hustle culture. We live in a world that glorifies perpetual motion, that equates busyness with importance, and that often views rest as laziness or wasted time. Our leaders are expected to be always on, constantly connected, and relentlessly productive, a model that is not only unsustainable but fundamentally at odds with the natural cycles that Nerthus represents. She embodies the ancient biological truth that all of nature operates in cycles, day and night, the seasons, the tides. Nothing in the natural world produces, gives, and grows without a corresponding period of dormancy, rest, and recovery. A field that is never allowed to lie fallow becomes exhausted and barren. By insisting on her period of seclusion, Nerthus was not neglecting her duties. She was ensuring that her power to bless and nurture would remain potent and renewable year after year, generation after generation. Her story is a powerful call to re-examine our relationship with rest, not as a luxury or a sign of weakness, but as a sacred and necessary component of true effectiveness. Sustainable leadership, whether of a nation, a company, a community, or simply one's own life, is not a marathon run at a sprint pace. It is a rhythmic dance of engagement and disengagement, of giving and receiving, of action and reflection. The leader who never retreats, who never takes the time for the equivalent of washing the sacred wagon in the hidden grove, risks burning out, becoming brittle, and ultimately losing the very creativity and compassion that made them effective in the first place. Nerthus teaches that power is not diminished by periods of quiet. It is deepened and purified by them. Her cyclical sovereignty suggests that the most resilient form of influence is one that honors its own limits, that recognizes the need for fallow periods, and that understands true renewal often requires a complete and intentional withdrawal from the demands of the world. In her ancient, peaceful procession and her subsequent sacred silence, we find a timeless blueprint for a kind of strength that endures not by force of will, but by wisdom of rhythm. Yet even a god of such immense and transformative power understands that to constantly engage with the world is to risk being consumed by it. In the vast and intricate pantheon of Hinduism, Shiva, the great destroyer and transformer, presents a fascinating paradox. He is one of the most powerful beings in the universe, capable of dissolving all of reality with a single dance, and yet he is also the supreme ascetic, the great yogi who spends vast eons in profound, silent meditation, utterly withdrawn from the dramas of gods and mortals alike. His preferred abode is not a glittering palace but the stark, serene isolation of Mount Kailash, a place of breathtaking beauty and absolute stillness. Here he sits immersed in samadhi, a state of deep, conscious union with the ultimate reality, completely indifferent to the comings and goings of the worldly sphere. His eyes are closed, his body smeared with the ash of renunciation, his only garment the skin of a tiger, a symbol of his mastery over the raw, animalistic forces of nature. In this state, he is the embodiment of pure consciousness, untouched by desire, ambition, or the need to interfere. This profound detachment is not a form of neglect or laziness. It is a conscious, strategic disengagement that forms the very foundation of his effective power. Shiva's reluctance to constantly intervene, his preference for deep introspection over constant action, offers a radical model of leadership and influence. In a world that often equates busyness with importance and constant visibility with strength, Shiva's example suggests the opposite. He demonstrates that true, potent action does not spring from a place of frantic reactivity or a bloated ego seeking validation. Instead, the most impactful interventions arise from a deep, unshakable inner stillness, a reservoir of calm clarity that remains undisturbed by the chaos of external events. He is the ultimate embodiment of the principle that to be powerful, one does not need to be perpetually in motion. In fact, it is often in the quiet space of non-action that the clearest vision and the wisest solutions are born. We see this principle play out dramatically in the ancient texts. The gods frequently find themselves in desperate situations, facing demons of such immense power that the very order of the cosmos is threatened. They try everything in their arsenal, but nothing works. In their utter desperation, they finally journey to Mount Kailash to plead for Shiva's help. They find him deep in meditation, seemingly oblivious to their crisis. They must work to pull him out of his samadhi, to bring his awareness back to the specific problem at hand. And when he does finally engage, his action is not a frantic, flailing response. It is precise, decisive, and utterly final. He doesn't raise an army or devise a complex strategy. He simply opens his third eye, and a beam of pure, concentrated spiritual fire annihilates the threat completely. His intervention is minimal, effortless, and devastatingly effective because it comes from a place of absolute centeredness, not from a place of panic. It is the difference between a surgeon making a calm, deliberate incision and a frightened person swinging a blade wildly. This narrative carries an incredibly valuable lesson for our modern, hyper-connected world, where the pressure to be constantly available, constantly producing, and constantly reacting can lead to burnout, poor judgment, and a loss of perspective. Shiva's character teaches the critical importance of building periods of deliberate retreat into our lives. This isn't about checking out permanently. It's about creating sacred spaces of silence and solitude where we can reconnect with our own inner compass, away from the noise of other people's demands and expectations. It is in these moments of withdrawal that we can process complex information, see the bigger picture, and access a deeper well of creativity and wisdom than our busy, surface-level minds can ever provide. Just as a lake must be still to clearly reflect the sky, our own minds need moments of complete quiet to reflect truth with clarity. Shiva's enduring legacy, therefore, is a masterclass in balancing engagement with reflection. He shows us that the most effective leaders, innovators, and thinkers are not those who are always on, but those who understand the rhythmic dance between action and inaction, between giving and receiving, between speaking and listening. His power is not diminished by his periods of silence, it is amplified by them. He emerges from his meditation not weakened but fortified, his actions infused with a wisdom and certainty that can only be found in the deepest wells of stillness. In a culture that glorifies the grind, the ancient Lord of the Mountain invites us to sit down, close our eyes, and discover that the most revolutionary act might sometimes be to simply do nothing at all. While Shiva's power is found in profound stillness, our next figure discovers his strength in a whirlwind of chaotic, clever, and often hilarious motion. Far from the serene peaks of Mount Kailash, in the vibrant, sun-drenched landscapes of West Africa and the storytelling traditions of the Caribbean, we meet a character who is the absolute master of turning a bad situation into an even more complicated one, only to somehow wriggle his way out at the last second. This is Anansi the spider, a trickster deity whose very name is synonymous with wit, cunning, and a kind of brilliant, reluctant cleverness that is never his first choice, but always his only way out. Anansi doesn't seek out grand quests or heroic battles. More often than not, he stumbles into his adventures because of his own greed, curiosity, or a simple desire to avoid a bit of hard work. He is the ultimate underdog, a small, seemingly insignificant creature who consistently finds that his most powerful asset isn't strength or size, but a quick and endlessly creative mind. His stories are masterclasses in creative problem solving, but they almost always begin with Anansi painting himself into a corner. He might, for instance, promise to bring a seemingly impossible assortment of creatures to the sky god, Nyame, not out of bravery, but because he's been promised a reward he desperately wants. Or he'll try to hoard all the world's wisdom in a pot, only to find he can't actually climb a tree while holding it. His reluctance isn't a refusal to engage with the problem. It's a deep-seated aversion to the straightforward, difficult, or honest path. He would much rather trick a leopard into tying himself up with vines or convince a hornet to fly into a gourd than engage in a fair fight or a day of honest labor. This isn't about malice, it's about a fundamental belief that any challenge, no matter how immense, can be outsmarted. He operates on the principle that the rules are merely suggestions, and that the most direct route from point A to point B is rarely a straight line, but a series of clever detours, deceptions, and delightful improvisations. This embrace of the unconventional makes Anansi a powerful symbol for anyone who has ever felt outmatched or out-resourced. His narratives are a thrilling celebration of intelligence and resourcefulness over brute force. He never wins because he's the strongest, he wins because he's the cleverest. He uses his wits to outsmart tigers, snakes, and even deities, proving that size and power are no match for a well-timed trick and a cleverly crafted story. His victories are never clean or easy. They are messy, chaotic, and often leave him dangling by a single, self-spun thread. But they are victories nonetheless, achieved through a combination of psychological insight, flawless timing, and an unshakable, almost arrogant confidence in his own mental agility. He teaches that when you can't meet a challenge on its own terms, you have the power to change the terms of the challenge itself. What truly sets Anansi apart and makes him so enduringly beloved is the humor and humanity woven into every story. He is not a perfect, infallible hero. He is boastful, greedy, lazy, and his plans frequently backfire in spectacularly funny ways. He often ends up in a worse situation than where he started, all because he tried to take a shortcut. We laugh at his antics because we see our own flaws reflected in him, our own desire to avoid difficult tasks, our own occasional greed, and our own moments of thinking we're smarter than everyone else. His reluctance to do things the right way is deeply relatable. His genius lies in his ability to then use those very flaws as the engine for his escape. He doesn't overcome his laziness, he weaponizes it, finding a lazier, and therefore more clever, way to achieve his goal. This makes him not a role model to emulate in every aspect, but a comforting reminder that even our perceived weaknesses can be sources of incredible strength and innovation when viewed from a different angle. Ultimately, the legacy of Anansi is a powerful invitation to think differently. In a world that often values sheer force and rigid adherence to established paths, his stories champion the rebel, the innovator, the one who looks at a locked door and wonders if there's an open window around the back. He encourages a mindset of playful ingenuity, especially in the face of overwhelming adversity. When the path ahead seems blocked by giants, Anansi's spirit asks us not to surrender, but to look for the lever, the loophole, or the clever story that can change the entire game. His adventures remind us that the most powerful tool we possess is our own creativity, and that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to approach it from a direction no one else would ever think to try. In a faith that places profound emphasis on the eternal struggle between good and evil, light and darkness, the Zoroastrian tradition offers a revolutionary vision of divinity not as a solitary, all-powerful king, but as a harmonious council of sacred ideals. These are the Amshir-Spenters, the holy immortals, and they represent one of the most sophisticated and beautiful concepts of shared, collaborative power in any world religion. They are not gods in the traditional sense, but rather 6 divine emanations or attributes of the Supreme Creator, Ahura Mazda. Each one embodies a specific virtue, like Vohumana, representing good purpose and the nurturing wisdom of the divine mind, or Ashavahishta, embodying ultimate truth and the cosmic order that governs the universe. They are not isolated entities competing for influence. They are an interconnected, interdependent team, each one's strength amplified and given meaning by its relationship to the others. Their very existence is a statement that the cosmos itself is upheld not by a single will, but by a delicate, active balance of these fundamental, co-operating principles. This structure presents a radical departure from the top-down, patriarchal hierarchies common in many ancient pantheons. There is no Zeus issuing thunderous commands from a solitary throne, no Odin hoarding knowledge for himself. Instead, the Amshir-Spenters model a form of governance that is deeply relational and collective. Their power is not about individual dominance but about synergistic support. Spenta Amati, the spirit of devotion and serenity, cannot fully manifest without the foundation of Asha, truth. Kshatra Varya, the power of desirable dominion and just rule, is hollow without the guiding compassion of Vohumana, good purpose. They are like a perfectly balanced ecosystem, where the health of the whole is entirely dependent on the harmonious function of every individual part. This isn't a committee with a chairperson. It's a celestial round table where every voice is essential, and leadership is a shared responsibility, rotating and shifting based on the need of the moment and the virtue required. This divine collaboration is then directly mirrored in the Zoroastrian vision for humanity and the material world. Each Amshir-Spenter is also a guardian and patron of a specific aspect of creation. For instance, Horvatat, who represents wholeness and integrity, is the protector of water, the element essential for all life. Amaratat, embodying immortality, watches over plants. This connection is profoundly significant. It means that the virtues these beings represent are not abstract spiritual concepts. They are the very fabric of the physical universe. To care for the water is to honor wholeness. To nurture plant life is to engage with the principle of immortality. This creates a sacred ecology where human duty is to actively partner with these divine forces in the ongoing battle against chaos and falsehood. Humans are not passive worshippers, they are junior colleagues to the Amshir-Spenters, tasked with manifesting these virtues: good thought, righteousness, devotion, in their own communities and through their stewardship of the natural world. Our labor becomes a form of prayer, and our communities become a reflection of that divine collaboration. The enduring legacy of the Amshir-Spenters is a powerful challenge to the cult of the individual leader, the lone genius, or the authoritarian ruler. Their model argues that the most complex and enduring problems, whether governing a society, protecting a planet, or simply living a good life, cannot be solved by a single perspective or a strongman's will. They require the integration of multiple strengths working in concert. This is a philosophy that champions the strength of the network over the strength of the node, suggesting that a community that prioritizes shared purpose and mutual support will always be more resilient, more creative, and more just than any hierarchy dominated by a single ego. In a modern world facing crises that demand collective action, from climate change to global inequality, the ancient wisdom of the Ancient Spenters feels startlingly relevant. They remind us that our true power has never resided in our ability to stand alone, but in our capacity to come together, to blend our unique strengths, and to work as one toward a common, holy purpose. Yet for all his heroic achievements, Maui's story is equally defined by a profound and very human reluctance, not a refusal to act, but a deep ambivalence about why he acts at all. His motivations are a tangled knot of genuine compassion and a desperate, often childish, hunger for recognition. When he slows the sun, it's not purely to give his mother more time to dry her bark cloth. It's also to prove he can, to show everyone that the little abandoned son they once threw into the sea is the most powerful being among them. When he fishes up islands from the ocean depths, it's to provide new land for humanity, but it's also a spectacular performance, a dramatic display of strength designed to win the love and admiration he has craved since infancy. This internal conflict makes him one of the most psychologically complex figures in any mythology. He is the ultimate reluctant hero because he is never fully committed to the heroism itself, only to the validation he hopes it will bring. He wants the reward of praise more than the satisfaction of the deed, and this very human flaw is what makes his struggles so instantly recognizable to us. This blurring of self-interest and altruism in Maui's character holds up a mirror to our own complicated relationship with ambition and service. We like to imagine our best actions are born from pure, selfless intention, but Maui's stories challenge that comfortable fiction. They suggest that our motives are almost always mixed, a swirling cocktail of genuine concern for others and a powerful desire for personal gain, acknowledgement, or simply to feel important. A leader might push for a transformative project out of a true belief in its communal benefit, but also to cement their own legacy. An artist might create a beautiful piece to share a profound emotion, but also to win critical acclaim. Maui teaches us that these impulses are not mutually exclusive. They are intertwined in almost everything we do. His narrative doesn't condemn this mix but rather normalizes it, encouraging a radical honesty about the messy, often contradictory, engines that drive our own behavior. And it is precisely this lack of purity that leads to some of his most famous failures, moments where his mixed motives result in catastrophic, unintended consequences. The most poignant of these is his quest to win immortality for humanity. Driven by a genuine love for his people and a characteristically Maui-sized ambition to perform the ultimate miracle, he seeks out the goddess of death, Väinämöinen. The plan is to crawl into her body as she sleeps and steal her heart, thus defeating death itself. But even here, at the most monumental of tasks, his impure motives surface. He brings along a retinue of small birds, not just for company but for an audience. He needs witnesses to his greatness. As he prepares to enter the goddess, the birds, who had promised to remain silent, are overcome by the absurdity and danger of the sight. One of them giggles. The sound wakes Väinämöinen, who instantly closes her body, crushing Maui to death. His quest for eternal life for all ends in his own permanent death, a tragedy triggered not by a lack of courage or power, but by the need for an audience to validate it. The lesson is devastatingly clear. When the performance of the act becomes more important than the act itself, even the most well-intentioned plans can shatter. This realism is the source of Maui's most enduring wisdom. Unlike myths that offer paragons of flawless virtue, Maui's stories give us a hero who is gloriously, frustratingly, and authentically imperfect. We see ourselves in his pride, his need for approval, his occasional petulance, and his brilliant, flawed ingenuity. We understand his reluctance to be the perfectly selfless savior because we feel that same reluctance in our own lives. We are also a mix of good intentions and selfish desires, and our actions also ripple out into the world with consequences we cannot always predict or control. Maui doesn't offer a simple moral, he offers a reflection. He encourages us to acknowledge the full spectrum of our motivations without shame, to understand that our humanity is defined by its complexities, not its purity. In the end, his greatest feat isn't slowing the sun or fishing up islands. It's showing us that true heroism isn't about having perfect motives, but about striving to do great things anyway, even with our very human heart full of conflicting reasons. But the most powerful transformations often happen not to gods on mountaintops, but to ordinary humans on dusty roads, and few stories capture the violent, disruptive, and ultimately hopeful nature of reluctant purpose quite like that of Saul of Tarsus. Here we have a man who was not merely indifferent to a divine calling, he was actively, zealously fighting against it with every fiber of his being. A devout and highly educated Pharisee, Saul was a rising star in the Jewish religious establishment, a man so committed to preserving the purity of his faith that he dedicated himself to the systematic persecution of its newest and most controversial sect, the followers of Jesus of Nazareth. He believed he was doing God's work, serving a righteous cause by hunting down these heretics, approving of their imprisonment and even their executions. His identity was built upon certainty, tradition, and a fierce sense of righteous duty, and he was moving with confident, brutal purpose in exactly the opposite direction of the destiny that awaited him. This is where his story begins, not with a quiet whisper of doubt, but with the thunderous clash of absolute conviction meeting an undeniable, divine interruption. That interruption happened on the road to Damascus, armed with official letters authorizing him to arrest any Christians he found in the city. Saul was journeying with his companions when a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, suddenly flashed around him. He fell to the ground, and a voice spoke to him, saying, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" When he asked who was speaking, the reply was utterly shattering. "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting." In that single cataclysmic moment, Saul's entire world, every belief, every conviction, every ambition, was completely inverted. The man he believed was a dead, disgraced false Messiah was not only alive but was speaking to him from a position of divine authority. The people Saul believed were defiling his faith were actually the very ones he was unknowingly attacking God by persecuting. His entire framework for understanding righteousness and sin, service and blasphemy, was demolished in an instant. His physical blindness, which followed the encounter, was a perfect metaphor for his spiritual state, stripped of his sight, utterly helpless, and led by the hand into a city he had intended to conquer, now a prisoner of his own shattered reality. This was not a gentle invitation, it was a forcible overhaul of his soul. The man who arrived in Damascus was not the proud, powerful Pharisee who had left Jerusalem. He was blind, terrified, and utterly broken, forced to sit in darkness for 3 days without eating or drinking, left alone with the horrifying realization that his life's work had been a profound mistake. This period of intense internal struggle is the heart of his reluctance. It wasn't a simple refusal, it was the agonizing process of a deeply entrenched identity being dismantled piece by piece. He had to surrender not just his actions, but his very understanding of God, of Scripture, and of himself. His conversion was less a decision and more a surrender, a complete and total capitulation to a truth so overwhelming that resistance was impossible. It was only when a faithful disciple named Ananias, himself initially reluctant to approach the famous persecutor, laid hands on him that his sight was restored, both physically and spiritually. He was baptized, and Saul the persecutor began his new life as Paul the Apostle. What makes Paul's story so uniquely powerful and enduring is that it is a story of radical grace, not earned merit. He did nothing to deserve this calling. In fact, he had done everything to deserve the opposite. His transformation underscores the idea that purpose is not always something we choose for ourselves. Sometimes it chooses us, often at the most inconvenient and disruptive times and in the most unexpected ways. His past, which he likely saw as a horrifying liability, became the very source of his unique authority. Who better to argue for the truth of the Christian message than the man who had once dedicated his life to destroying it? His profound knowledge of Jewish law and scripture allowed him to become its most brilliant interpreter through this new lens of grace. His journey reminds us that our greatest weaknesses and our most profound mistakes do not disqualify us from a meaningful future. They can become the raw material for our most powerful contributions. Paul's eventual embrace of his role was not a quiet acceptance but a lifelong, passionate conviction that would see him travel the known world, facing shipwrecks, beatings, imprisonment, and ultimately execution. He became the architect of Christian theology, his letters forming a significant portion of the New Testament, but he never forgot the struggle on that road. He frequently referred to himself as the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called one because he had persecuted the church. This humility, born from that initial, violent reluctance, kept him grounded. His story offers a profound hope that is available to everyone, the hope that no one is too far gone, that no past is too dark, and that a new beginning is not about turning a new leaf, but about receiving a new heart. It is a testament to the idea that the most resistant heart can be transformed, and that the most unlikely candidate can become an essential voice, proving that destiny is not about where we start, but about who we are willing to become when our old road suddenly, blindingly, comes to an end. And so we find ourselves at the end of our journey, having traveled from the celestial peaks of Olympus to the quiet depths of the sea, from the fiery forges of creation to the silent caves of retreat. We have met gods who fled from thrones, sages who hesitated to share their wisdom, and tricksters who stumbled into greatness. Each of these stories, in its own unique way, circles back to a single, profound truth that the most enduring and meaningful power is never grasped out of hunger, but is often accepted with a heavy heart and a deep sense of responsibility. These myths dismantle our glorified image of the power-hungry ruler and replace it with something far more relatable and far more wise, the leader who understands the weight of the crown because they felt its burden before they ever felt its privilege. This is not a weakness but the ultimate source of their strength. Their initial reluctance is the very thing that makes them trustworthy, because it proves their motives were never about personal glory, but about the solemn duty to something greater than themselves. This ancient wisdom offers a vital mirror for our modern world, where leadership is so often conflated with loud confidence, unshakable certainty, and the relentless pursuit of more influence, more control, more recognition. The reluctant deities show us a different path. They model a form of authority rooted in empathy because, having doubted themselves, they can understand the doubts of others. They practice humility because they have seen firsthand how easily power can corrupt, and they champion service over domination because they were never seduced by the perks of command, only conscious of its costs. Whether you are a CEO guiding a company, a teacher shaping young minds, a parent nurturing a family, or simply a person trying to navigate your own choices with integrity, these stories ask us to reframe what power means. It is not a trophy to be won, but a trust to be earned and a tool to be used for the benefit of all. So the next time you face a decision, large or small, remember the quiet wisdom of Hestia, who knew that true influence often resides in the spaces we choose not to dominate. Remember the solemn duty of Vishnu, who understood that even a divine mission requires personal sacrifice. Remember the painful lessons of Jamshid, whose fall reminds us that success without humility is a fragile illusion. These myths are not just entertaining tales from a distant past. They are a timeless conversation about the human condition, offering guidance that is as relevant in a boardroom or a community meeting as it was in an ancient temple. They invite us to lead not with our titles but with our character, and to find our greatest power not in commanding others, but in understanding when to step forward, when to step back.